So what if the only thing standing between you and, completely changing the world or even just changing your industry isn't a lack of funding?
Yeah.
And it's not some magical new invention, but simply your choice to step up and lead a group of people who are honestly already waiting for you.
Yeah, that tension right there, right?
Yeah.
Between waiting for permission and just, well, choosing to lead.
Mhm.
That is really the defining shift of our modern era. I mean, we are living through this massive structural change in how human beings organize and connect and actually initiate change.
Right.
For decades, we operated under this factory mindset. We really believed leadership was this rare privilege handed down from the very top of an organization. But the mechanics of the world have completely inverted. The old barriers, they've just vanished.
Which means we really need to unpack what it actually means to lead today. Because in today's deep dive into the foundational first chapter of our sources, we are exploring the rebirth of tribes in the modern era.
Yeah.
And we're going to look at why the internet has transformed leadership from this rare, specialized privilege into what is basically an everyday expectation. So whether you're an entrepreneur or a creative or just trying to survive in the corporate world, you're about to learn why assembling and leading a tribe is the single most powerful shortcut to making a lasting impact.
Yeah, and the mission for our deep dive today is to really decode what exactly makes a modern tribe, like how geography literally no longer holds us back, and why, all the digital tools in the world to lead are totally worthless without the actual personal desire to initiate change.
It's so true. I mean, let's just start with the absolute basics because the word tribe gets thrown around relentlessly, right? You hear it in corporate marketing meetings.
Oh,
You
constantly.
see it on influencers' profiles. It's almost lost its meaning completely. But the material we're analyzing today, it defines it with incredible precision. A tribe is not just a group of people.
Right, it's not just a demographic.
Exactly. It requires only a couple of things, really. A shared interest and a way to communicate. But structurally, it's a group of people connected to one another, connected to a leader, and connected to an idea.
And, the simplicity of that definition is kind of deceptive
Yeah.
because it masks millions of years of evolutionary weight.
Oh, for sure.
Think about human history. Our survival as a species, it didn't depend on individual strength or solitary genius. It depended entirely on our ability to belong to a tribe.
Right. If you were out on your own in the wilderness.
You didn't survive, period. So hardwired into our psychology is this incredibly deep primal pull toward connection. We have this innate survival mechanism that is just constantly scanning the environment, looking for our people.
Looking for that safety in numbers, yeah.
Exactly. We want a group of like-minded individuals where we can contribute, where we feel safe, and where we can take cues from a leader who, gives the group a shared direction. We don't just want one tribe either. We actually want to join many.
Right, which makes a lot of sense from a purely anthropological standpoint. But how does that translate into the modern business landscape? Because we aren't, foraging for food anymore. We're out here selling software or music or consulting services.
Well, the translation is actually completely seamless because human nature hasn't changed. Just the environment has. So to see how this perfectly maps onto modern business, the source material looks at the Grateful Dead.
Okay. Yeah, this is a great example.
They essentially laid the blueprint for modern tribal leadership. And this was decades before the internet even existed. Now, if you look at their financial success, they grossed over $100 million.
Which is massive for that era.
Massive. But the really fascinating detail here is that they only ever had one top 40 album.
Wait, really? Just one? Because, let's pause on that for a second. One top 40 album. If you look at the traditional music industry model, especially back in the 70s and 80s, that math just shouldn't work.
She shouldn't at all.
The entire industry was built on this broadcast model, right? The record label finds an artist, they push a hit single to mass radio, the radio broadcasts it to millions of passive listeners, and then a tiny percentage of those listeners actually go to a physical store to buy the record.
Yeah, it's a giant funnel.
Right. You needed mass exposure to get mass sales.
And that is the broadcast model, perfectly summarized. It's totally top-down. It's heavy on friction. And it requires this massive capital to just, yell at the largest possible audience in the hopes that a few people are actually listening.
And the Grateful Dead they bypassed that entirely.
Completely bypassed it. They realized that trying to please the masses with some generic hit song was just a losing game. So instead, they focused entirely on the first pillar of our definition, connecting people to an idea.
And their idea was the live experience, right?
Exactly. The live experience, the whole ethos of the band, the constant touring. They didn't sell records to the masses. They created an environment where a very specific group of people could gather,
The deadheads.
the deadheads. And the author points out this brilliant psychological detail about how this tribe operated. When one deadhead meets another, they might drop a specific phrase, like a code. They might say 21470.
Right, which to anyone outside the tribe is literally just a random string of numbers.
Just numbers. But to the insider, it is the secret handshake. It's the date of a legendary concert. But, knowing the date isn't even the actual point. It's about the signal it sends.
It's a tribal identifier. Like when you say 21470 and the other person's eyes light up, you've just instantly bypassed like months of awkward small talk.
You've established a shared identity right then and there. The smiles, the hugs, the immediate camaraderie that is the actual rush of belonging that our evolutionary psychology is so desperate for.
So the Grateful Dead didn't just play music.
No, they facilitated a safe space where people could experience that rush together. They provided the shared interest, and those famous parking lot scenes at the concerts provided the physical location for the communication.
So the band acted as the leader, the music was the idea, and the concert itself was the lateral connection between the members. But, okay, let me push back a little here. The Grateful Dead is a very unique cultural phenomenon. What if you aren't selling, psychedelic rock and tie-dye? What if you're selling something incredibly dry, like B2B software?
Well, the mechanics are actually identical, even if the aesthetic is, totally different. Let's look at a completely different industry. The material introduces this guy named Joel Spolsky.
Right, the software guy.
Yeah. He runs a relatively small software company in New York, and on paper, he's just another tech executive. But if you search his name on Google, you'll find something like 76 million matches, and he is the undisputed #1 result.
Wow. And I imagine that kind of search volume doesn't just come from selling a standard software product. How did he build that kind of gravity?
He built it by establishing what we'd call a vertical tribe.
Okay, define that for us.
So a horizontal tribe might be everyone who loves a certain type of music, right? Spread out across all walks of life. But a vertical tribe is deeply embedded within a specific profession or hierarchy. Joel's passion wasn't just his company's specific product. It was the whole philosophy of how software should be built and how programmers should be treated.
Ah, okay.
Through his writing, he fundamentally changed how smart people in the tech industry think about hiring and managing and just doing the work.
He's the creator of the Joel test, right?
That's the one.
Yeah, it's like this 12-step checklist for evaluating a software development team.
Yes. And if we look at the mechanics of the Joel test, it operates exactly like the 21470 code did for the deadheads.
Oh, that's a great connection.
Think about the daily life of a software engineer before Joel came along. You might be, sitting in a cubicle, totally frustrated by terrible management, working without proper source control, feeling like literally nobody understands the technical debt you were drowning in.
You feel completely isolated.
Right. And then Joel Spolsky publishes this 12-point checklist. Point 1, do you use source control? Point 2, can you make a build in one step? Point 3, do you fix bugs before writing new code?
And suddenly, it's not just a checklist anymore. It's a manifesto that perfectly articulates the programmer's pain. It gives them a shared language.
And a shared identity.
Yeah.
When a programmer takes that test to a job interview and asks the hiring manager, hey, what is your Joel test score? They are basically waving a tribal flag.
They're establishing who gets it and who doesn't.
They are instantly determining who is in the tribe and who is out. Joel provided the shared interest, which is better software environments. He provided the communication platform through his heavily trafficked job board and his blog.
Yeah.
And he provided the leadership by clearly articulating those standards. In return, this massive tribe of programmers gave him their attention, their trust, and ultimately their business.
Right. He gave them a lever to alter how their own industry operates. That is powerful. But I'm tracking with the mechanics here, and I have a major point of confusion that I think a lot of people listening might share.
Okay, what is it?
So I hear the Grateful Dead's fan base and Joel Spolsky's blog readers, and my immediate thought is, isn't a tribe just a trendy buzzword for a target market? Or a customer base? How is this fundamentally different from a company that just has a lot of repeat buyers?
I am so glad you asked that, because that is the most critical distinction we have to make. Confusing a market with a tribe will cause any leadership attempt to fail immediately.
Okay, lay it out for us.
A market is simply a group of people you sell to. It is entirely transactional. The relationship is a straight line from the corporation to the consumer. I have a product, I interrupt your day with an advertisement, and hopefully you buy it. The communication is strictly top-down.
So a market is basically a megaphone. I talk, you listen.
Exactly. A megaphone.
Right.
A tribe, on the other hand, absolutely requires lateral connection. The defining characteristic isn't just that the leader talks to the members, but that the members actually talk to each other.
Oh, right.
They interact, they coordinate, they share the identity, even when the leader isn't actively speaking.
Okay, let's visualize this because I like to use analogies. Think about a massive sports stadium during a championship game. If you view that stadium purely as a market, what you have is, let's say, 50,000 individual consumers.
Right.
They all bought a ticket from the franchise, they're all buying hot dogs from the concession stands, and they are all individually watching the athletes on the field. That is a broadcast transactional relationship. The team is selling an entertainment product, and 50,000 completely disconnected people are consuming it.
That is a perfect encapsulation of a market. Everyone is just facing forward.
Right. But then, say, during a lull in the game, something shifts. A small group of fans in one section stands up and throws their arms in the air.
Yeah, the wave.
Exactly. Then the next section does it, and suddenly those same 50,000 disconnected hot dog buyers are doing the wave. It ripples around the entire stadium. The franchise didn't announce over the loudspeaker, "Attention consumers, please initiate the wave."
Right. They didn't mandate it.
No. The team simply provided the venue and the shared interest of the game. But the fans themselves initiated lateral communication. They coordinated a massive, spontaneous action purely for the rush of shared identity and belonging. In that moment, the market transforms into a tribe.
I love that analogy. It's so clear. The wave literally does not happen without lateral connection. The fans have to be looking at each other, not just at the field.
Exactly.
And the practical question for anyone listening who is trying to build a movement or a business is this: are you just managing a stadium full of hot dog buyers? Are you just blasting emails to a list of consumers and tracking open rates?
Right.
Or are you creating an environment, a platform, a set of shared values that allows your audience to turn to each other and do the wave? If you're the only one talking, you do not have a tribe. You just have an audience.
That fundamentally shifts the perspective on community building, doesn't it? It removes the burden of having to generate every single piece of value yourself, and it shifts the focus to facilitating connections between other people. But historically, facilitating those lateral connections was incredibly difficult, right? You were constrained by physical reality.
Oh, geography was the ultimate prison for tribes.
Yeah.
For the vast majority of human history, your tribe was strictly determined by your zip code. If you lived in a village, your tribe was the village. In the mid-20th century, a tribe might be, the local chapter of a political party, say the Democrats in Springfield. Or it might be a highly specific hobbyist group, like model car enthusiasts in Sacramento.
And if you lived in Sacramento, but you were interested in, say, vintage French cinema, and there was no one else in your neighborhood who cared about it, you were just out of luck.
You were completely isolated, an anomaly. You had no one to connect with laterally, which meant you just couldn't form a tribe. The physical friction of finding people who shared your specific worldview was simply too high.
Right.
But the internet has effectively murdered geography. It has completely eliminated physical distance as a barrier to entry for tribal connection.
Which is huge. The death of geography seems like it would have these staggering economic and social implications. It completely rewrites the rules of supply and demand for attention.
It really does.
Yeah.
When you remove geography, two things happen simultaneously. First, existing tribes can scale to a size that was previously unimaginable because they can recruit globally.
Sure.
But second, and honestly much more importantly, it allows for the creation of micro-niches. Thousands of highly influential hyper-specific tribes can now form that simply did not have the local population density to exist before.
Because now if you're that person passionate about vintage French cinema or, I don't know, obscure 1980s synthesizers or a very specific methodology for urban farming, you don't need to find someone in your physical town.
No, you don't.
You can find the 5,000 other people on the entire planet who share that exact narrow obsession.
You can find them, you can connect them to each other, and you can lead them. A beautiful illustration of this non-geographical leadership is the work of Jacqueline Novogratz.
Oh, yeah, the Acumen Fund.
Exactly. She is the founder of the Acumen Fund. Her mission is to tackle global poverty. But she isn't doing it by acting as a traditional top-down charity. She is leading a global tribe.
How so?
She is inspiring entrepreneurs in the developing world to create enterprises that deliver essential services, things like clean water, affordable ambulances, and reading glasses.
And to do that effectively on a global scale, she has to be leading people she has never physically met.
She is challenging people in 20 different countries simultaneously. She's leading this vast, decentralized network of donors, employees, social entrepreneurs, and just supporters.
Wow.
They are scattered across continents, they speak different languages, they live in completely different physical realities. Yet they are tightly connected to her leadership and tightly connected to the shared idea of scalable, sustainable philanthropy. That kind of synchronized global movement was logistically impossible before the death of geography.
Yeah, the material actually provides a few other stark examples of this non-geographical mobilization. It analyzes the underlying architecture of how different organizations gather momentum today. It looks at the professionals inside the CIA as a tribe, it looks at the volunteers at the ACLU as a tribe, and it points out the mechanical feat of Barack Obama's 2008 political campaign, raising $50 million in 28 days.
And we should definitely pause here to make a very clear distinction for our listeners. The material brings up the CIA, the ACLU, and political fundraising campaigns strictly as clinical, mechanical examples of non-geographical organization.
Right. Good point.
We are looking at the math of mobilization here. We are analyzing the physics of how human beings coordinate in the modern era. We're absolutely not endorsing any political ideology candidate or specific organizational mission. The focus is purely on the mechanism.
Understood. And looking purely at the mechanism, raising $50 million in less than a month from a massive decentralized base of small donors, that is a structural feat that simply could not happen if you were relying on local geography.
Right. Imagine trying to do that locally.
Right. If you had to organize physical town halls, print out physical flyers, and have volunteers walk door to door in their own neighborhoods to collect physical checks, the friction of the physical world would make that velocity totally impossible. The internet allows for instant, frictionless coordination across vast distances.
And the practical takeaway from that realization is incredibly liberating for anyone trying to build something today. You need to stop worrying about pleasing the masses in your immediate physical vicinity.
Stop trying to be everything to everyone nearby.
Exactly. Stop trying to water down your art or your product or your idea so that the average person on your local street will find it acceptable. The internet allows you to bypass the local average entirely. You can go out and find your specific weirdos, the people who resonate deeply with your uncompromised vision anywhere in the world. You do not need a mass market. You just need your tribe.
That brings us to the actual mechanisms of connection, right? The tools themselves. Because obviously the internet is what makes finding these global micro-niches possible. But the material makes this really fascinating distinction about the nature of tribes before and after the digital revolution. It describes older tribes as being squishy.
Yeah, squishy is a brilliant descriptor for the friction of old communication methods.
It paints a picture.
It really does. Before the internet, coordinating a tribe was a heavy lift. If you wanted to get a message to your members, you had to type up a physical newsletter, run it through a printing press, physically stuff it into envelopes, attach postage stamps, and hand it to the postal service.
The time and cost alone.
And then you waited days or weeks for the members to read it. If they wanted to talk to each other, they had to organize phone trees or, schedule physical meetups.
The communication loops were incredibly slow. It was inefficient, expensive, and it made it very difficult for a tribe to react to new information quickly or to grow at any real velocity. The connections were loose. They were, well, squishy.
But today, that squishiness has been replaced by tautness.
Tautness, yeah.
Instant digital communication pulls the tribe tight. We have seen an absolute explosion of coordination tools over the last 2 decades. Platforms like Facebook, X, Meetup, Basecamp, Slack, Discord. There are countless ways to send a signal to 1 million people simultaneously for free in a fraction of a second.
And a great case study in leveraging these tools to pull a tribe taut is Gary Vaynerchuk.
Oh, absolutely.
Long before he was running a massive media empire, he was just a guy working in his family's liquor store in New Jersey, and he started this thing called Wine Library TV.
Right. It was one of the earliest video blogs,
Hmm.
completely focused on tasting and discussing wine, and millions of people ended up tuning in. But we have to look at the psychology of why they tuned in.
Yeah, because it wasn't typical marketing.
Not at all.
No.
They didn't watch him because he was deploying aggressive sales tactics or because he was treating them like a market to be extracted from. They tuned in because he was narrating their shared passion.
He was incredibly generous with his expertise. He wasn't acting like a corporate spokesperson pushing inventory. He was acting like an enthusiastic fellow member of the tribe who just happened to be stepping up to lead the conversation.
Exactly.
He helped them discover new things. He validated their tastes. He challenged their assumptions. He used the relatively new medium of online video to broadcast his passion, but he also used the comment sections and forums to allow the audience to connect laterally.
He used the tool perfectly.
Yeah.
But this raises a profound caveat, and it is perhaps the most important warning in the entire source material.
Let's hear it.
The internet is just a tool. It is an infrastructure that enables tactics. But the actual power of a tribe has absolutely nothing to do with keyboards or fiber optic cables or software algorithms. It has everything to do with human psychology and intent.
It's so easy to get mesmerized by the technology and forget the humanity.
All the digital platforms in the world, every social media account, every project management software, every email list are completely worthless if you don't actually commit to the act of leading.
Let me try an analogy here to see if I'm grasping the relationship between the tools and the leadership.
Go for it.
Having a massive social media following or a sophisticated Discord server is like building a highly advanced nervous system. You have all these nerve endings spread out across the globe, capable of sending instant signals back and forth.
So you can see where this is going.
But a nervous system without a brain is just a biological curiosity, right? It might twitch, it might react to random stimuli, but it can't move with purpose. The digital tools are the nerves. The leader's intent, their genuine desire to initiate change, is the brain. If you don't have the brain, the nerves don't matter. Like having Twitter or Basecamp is like owning a really expensive treadmill. It doesn't make you fit unless you actually have the desire to run.
That analogy hits the nail on the head. A nervous system without intent is just noise. And having a digital platform without the genuine desire to lead is just digital noise. If you do not have the internal fire to make something happen, to challenge the status quo, or to connect people for their own benefit, it doesn't matter what software you use.
Right.
In fact, the material explicitly states that if you lack that genuine desire, it is entirely okay to hold off.
Wait, it's okay not to lead.
Yes. It is better not to lead than to force it for the wrong reasons.
Yeah.
It's okay to step back and let someone else who actually has the passion take the reins. You shouldn't try to manufacture leadership just because it seems like a profitable tactic or just because setting up a social media account is free and easy.
That makes total sense.
Authentic, generous leadership will always outlast and defeat the selfish efforts of a manipulator who is just going through the motions because the tools are available.
So if you're listening to this and feeling overwhelmed by the constant pressure to master the newest platform or the latest algorithmic trend, take a breath. The practical takeaway is to stop obsessing over the technology.
Please stop obsessing.
The tools will naturally serve your desire once you clarify what that desire actually is. Focus entirely on your authentic intent to connect people and lead a movement.
And that focus on intent over position leads us directly into a very common, very limiting misconception about who is actually allowed to lead.
Right.
We have this culturally ingrained idea that to be a leader, you have to be the CEO of a company, or a high-profile politician, or an author standing on a stage with a microphone.
We equate leadership with formal authority and public visibility.
Exactly. We assume it requires a title. But the material introduces a concept called the tribe inside. It argues that some of the most powerful and effective tribes exist entirely inside of existing organizations, and they're led by people who do not have the ultimate formal authority. You can lead powerfully from the middle.
The material highlights Mick Matthews as the prime example of this, right?
Yep.
She was the senior vice president of Microsoft's Central Marketing Group. Now, outside of the tech industry bubble, the general public has likely never heard of her. She's not a famous public intellectual. She wasn't the CEO.
But inside the walls of Microsoft, her influence was staggering. For over a decade, Bill Gates and Steve Ballmer, the absolute top of the corporate hierarchy, relied heavily on her vision to market the company to the world.
Wow.
She wasn't trying to build a public audience. She was building an internal tribe. She led a massive organization of thousands of employees who were responsible for the company's narrative.
And she didn't just manage them in a top-down factory sense. She actually led them.
She led them. That internal tribe of colleagues listened to her, they respected her insights, and they actively chose to follow her direction. Earning that kind of lateral respect and attention from thousands of intelligent, highly capable peers is a profound privilege.
And a massive responsibility.
Exactly. She had to constantly initiate change from within the bureaucracy.
Why is this concept of the tribe inside so critical for modern businesses, though? Like, why can't a corporation just rely on the CEO and the executive board to dictate all the leadership downward like they used to?
Because the velocity and complexity of the modern world have completely shattered the factory model of business. Historically, during the industrial era, organizations were built as rigid, top-down hierarchies.
A classic pyramid.
Right. The CEO was the absolute monarch, the managers were the overseers making sure the manual was followed, and the employees were just cogs in the machine, executing repetitive tasks. In that model, information and leadership only flowed downward.
But today, if a company waits for the CEO to notice a shift in the market, formulate a plan, and dictate it down through 5 levels of management, by the time the frontline workers get the memo, the market has already moved on. The company is obsolete.
Precisely. The environment is just too dynamic. Top management realizes this. They know they cannot see everything. Therefore, modern organizations desperately expect leadership from everywhere, not just the C-suite.
So they need the middle to step up.
Yes. They need people in the middle of the hierarchy, people like Mitch Matthews, to step up, identify problems, rally their peers, challenge the outdated internal processes, and create necessary change before external disruption forces it upon them.
So an internal tribe is essentially a group of employees who coalesce around a colleague who has earned the privilege of shaping the company's direction, regardless of what that colleague's official title might be.
Yes. The formal hierarchy becomes secondary to the tribal dynamic, and the practical implication for our listeners is massive. You do not need to quit your corporate job and launch a risky startup to become a leader.
You don't have to go it alone.
Right. You don't need to wait 10 years until you're promoted to vice president either. Look around your current office, your current department, your current Slack channels. There is very likely a tribe of frustrated, ambitious colleagues yearning for someone to articulate a better way of doing things. You have the opportunity to lead from the middle right now.
That brings us to the grand synthesis of this material, which makes a very bold, sweeping claim about the current state of the world. For a long time, the dominant mantra in business literature was, everyone is a marketer.
I remember that phase well.
The idea was that because of social media, every employee, every customer could influence a brand's reputation. But the thesis we are analyzing pushes far beyond that. The new reality is, everyone is now a leader.
It is a profound paradigm shift.
Yeah.
And it is driven by a unique convergence of 3 distinct market conditions that have literally never existed simultaneously before.
Let's break those down.
First, we have unprecedented leverage. The digital tools we discussed have driven the cost of organizing people down to zero. The friction is completely gone. Second, there is a deep societal shift in desire.
People want more.
People are waking up. They are no longer satisfied with trading their time just to be a compliant cog in an industrial machine. They actively want to do work they believe in, and they want to follow people who inspire them.
And what is the third condition?
The marketplace itself has changed its reward system. The market actively punishes the status quo and richly rewards the remarkable, the innovative, and the bespoke. Standardized, average products for average people are failing. The economy is begging for individuals to step up and create something unique.
So if we look at this objectively, we have the infinite leverage of the internet, we have a population desperate for meaningful connection and work, and we have an economy that pays a premium for innovation. The table is perfectly set.
It is.
What is the problem then? Why isn't everyone stepping into this vacuum and leading?
The barrier is no longer structural. It is entirely psychological. It's fear. We are paralyzed by an industrial hangover. Instead of acting like leaders, or what the material refers to as heretics, people who willingly challenge the established dogma, we default to acting like managers or compliant factory employees.
We wait for instructions.
We hide behind company policies. We wait for someone to tell us what to do. We worry obsessively about what the boss will say if we try something new.
It is a tragic irony when you think about it historically, because back in the actual industrial era, that fear was highly adaptive. It kept you alive. Fear of change protected you in a factory setting.
Totally.
If you were working on a literal assembly line in 1920 and you decided to get creative and deviate from the instruction manual, you would break the machine, stall the production line, and immediately lose your job. In a factory, efficiency and compliance are the only goals. Standing out is dangerous.
But today, that exact same fear, the instinct to keep your head down and avoid being noticed, is your absolute worst enemy. The fear that used to protect your livelihood is now the very thing guaranteeing your obsolescence.
Wow.
The factory era is ending. If you cling to the mindset of a compliant employee waiting for instructions in a world that demands initiative, you will be left behind. The modern market simply does not reward compliance. It only rewards leadership.
Okay, I have to push back on this vision of a decentralized utopia because realistically it sounds like a logistical nightmare.
I get that a lot.
If literally everyone in a company or everyone in a society decides they are going to be a leader, doesn't that just result in absolute chaos? How do you run a functional business if nobody wants to execute the tasks and everyone is just trying to lead their own tribe? It's the ultimate too many cooks in the kitchen scenario.
That is a very rational concern, but we need to examine how the material actually frames this decentralization. The premise is that the market demands constant change, and change fundamentally requires leadership. Without leaders, there are no followers, and without followers, there is no forward momentum. Now, realistically, human nature dictates that not everyone will choose to lead at the exact same time on the exact same issue.
Right. Like, I might lead a specific initiative regarding a new software deployment, but I will happily be a follower when a colleague leads an initiative on restructuring the marketing budget.
Exactly. Leadership becomes fluid and situational rather than rigid and hierarchical. The point the material is making is not that everyone must be shouting directions simultaneously. The point is that the opportunity to lead is now completely decentralized. The gates have been torn down.
It's not that everyone will lead all the time. It's that anyone can lead at any time, from any position.
Precisely. You no longer need to wait for a formal promotion. You no longer need to wait for a venture capitalist to fund you. You no longer need to submit a proposal to some mythical Bureau of Idea approval and wait months for a stamp of legitimacy.
The Bureau of Idea approval, I love that.
Right. But the physical tools are free. The structural pathways are clear. The only remaining question, the only bottleneck left in the entire system is an internal one. Will I choose to do it?
Will I overcome the evolutionary fear of standing out, raise my hand, and say, I see a better way? That is the ultimate practical takeaway for everyone listening. You have to stop waiting for permission. The permission has already been granted by the market. The people are already out there waiting for someone to connect them.
If we synthesize the vast terrain we've covered today, it boils down to one clear, vital insight that represents the absolute core of this chapter.
Let's hear it.
The industrial factory era gave us managers, whose job was to enforce compliance. But the modern connection era demands leaders, whose job is to initiate change. A tribe is not a mystical concept. It is simply a group of people waiting for someone to raise their hand and say, follow me, let's make things better. The digital tools to reach them are virtually free, the geographic boundaries are entirely dead, and the only missing ingredient is your...
Have you ever looked around your workplace or maybe your industry or even, I don't know, your favorite hobby group and just realized that everyone is kind of going through the motions?
Oh, yeah, like they're just sleepwalking.
Exactly, just sleepwalking through the day. And so it makes you wonder, what if the only thing standing between that stagnant, stuck group and a literal world-changing movement is, well, yeah.
It's a heavy question, right?
Oh.
And to really answer it, I think we have to look at this guy named Thomas Barnett.
Okay.
So post 9/11, the Pentagon was, arguably the most rigid, bureaucratic, top-down organization on the planet. And Barnett, he was a researcher.
Not a general.
Right, not a four-star general. He had zero command authority. He definitely didn't have the power to just, deploy troops or restructure the military apparatus on a whim.
He was basically just a node at the bottom of this incredibly complex, massive org chart.
Exactly. But he had this huge vision for how the modern military needed to radically adapt to a totally changing world. So what did he do? He didn't just wait around for a promotion.
Yeah, that wouldn't have worked.
No, and he didn't write some memo that would just get buried in a basement filing cabinet either.
Yeah.
Instead, he built a 3-hour PowerPoint presentation.
Which is funny because usually PowerPoint is like the ultimate tool of corporate boredom.
It's where ideas go to die.
Yeah.
But Barnett, he designed this presentation almost like performance art. He used it as a beacon. He just delivered it over and over again, quietly finding the people within the military who were, already hungry for change, the ones who are already questioning the status quo.
So he essentially used that one presentation to galvanize this entire network of people who were passionate about modernizing the structure.
Exactly.
He provided the spark, and then the communication among his peers turned it into a movement that actually ended up influencing the Pentagon's grand strategy. I mean, one guy.
With a PowerPoint. Which is crazy, but it perfectly illustrates the reality of modern organizations. I mean, we spend so much time waiting for the boss or the official organizer to step up, completely ignoring the fact that the tools to lead and the people desperate for leadership, they're literally already sitting right in front of us.
And that is exactly the focus of our deep dive today. We are exploring the critical mechanics of how movements are born, and really why the whole era of traditional management and top-down authority is just completely dead.
Dead and buried.
Yeah. So over the next hour or so, you're going to learn why the comfort of stability in business is actually a really dangerous illusion, and how anyone, regardless where you sit on your company's org chart, can use the invisible dynamics of networks to lead.
Because if you're interested in business or entrepreneurship, or frankly just making a difference in your community, this matters. The market no longer rewards compliance. It exclusively rewards those who can ignite a tribe.
Right. And to do that, we really need to completely dissect the engine of a movement. We're going to look at several high-profile examples today. So political campaigns, tech startups, massive nonprofits, cultural phenomena.
And we should probably state up front, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, if we look objectively at the organizational mechanics behind something like a massive political campaign or a really controversial advocacy group, we're setting aside the politics entirely.
100%. We're seeing a fascinating shared architecture in how these groups mobilize people, whether they lean left, right, or center.
Right, we are just dissecting the engine. We are not debating where the car should drive. We're strictly looking at the mechanical framework of how these entities function, how they communicate, and how they mobilize, so you can apply that exact same architecture to your own business or your own passions.
So looking at this engine, I think we had to start with the baseline anthropology of it all.
Let's do it.
So humans naturally form tribes. It's an ancient survival mechanism, right?
Right.
But the actual requirements for a tribe are shockingly minimal.
Like, how minimal are we talking?
Well, really minimal. To form a tribe, you basically only need two elements, a shared interest and a way to communicate. That is it.
Wow.
Yeah, you don't need a corporate headquarters, you don't need a charter, and you definitely do not need a CEO.
A shared interest and a way to communicate. So technically, a group of 500 people scattered across the globe who obsessively restore vintage espresso machines and who all talk on some specific Reddit forum that is a tribe.
Absolutely, that's a perfect example. But here is the critical fault line we need to establish right away. Most of these tribes, they exist in a state of total paralysis. They're stuck.
Right, because they have the shared interest and they have the communication channels, but they just embrace the status quo.
Exactly. They become these massive echo chambers where the primary activity isn't progress at all. It's gatekeeping.
Gatekeeping.
Yeah, just drowning out anyone who dares to question the accepted order of things. They completely lack motion.
I see this all the time. It's like the difference between a neighborhood watch committee that only meets once a month to complain about property values and gossip about the neighbors.
This is exhausting.
Right. Versus a movement, which would be that exact same group of people actually picking up shovels, organizing a community garden, and transforming an empty lot down the street. One is entirely static and the other is just thrilling. A movement is the work of many connected people actively seeking something better.
Yes, and historically, turning a stuck tribe into a movement was incredibly difficult. The friction was just too high. Coordinating a group of people across geographical boundaries, trying to get them to actually move in unison, it was what the author might call squishy.
Squishy. Let's unpack the mechanics of that. When we say squishy, we're really talking about the era of broadcast media, right? Top-down, one-way communication.
Exactly. Think about how a movement had to be organized, 30 or 40 years ago. You had to take out a full-page ad in a newspaper or buy expensive television time or send out thousands of pieces of direct mail.
You were basically just broadcasting a message into the void.
Totally. It was incredibly expensive. It was really slow. And most importantly, the feedback loop was practically non-existent. You couldn't easily measure engagement, and the people receiving the message had almost no way to coordinate with each other. The leader just shouted into a megaphone, and the crowd listened in isolation.
But the internet fundamentally altered the physics of that coordination. It removed the friction. The infrastructure we have today has made coordinating tribes taut and measurable.
Tautness is the key concept here. A taut network is one with high-speed feedback loops and essentially zero marginal cost of communication. Let's look at the mechanics of Barack Obama's 2008 presidential campaign.
Right.
Again, purely from a structural perspective, his campaign was able to raise $50 million in just 28 days. And that was largely from small individual donors.
Which was unprecedented at the time. If we forensically unpack how that actually happened, it wasn't just because they bought better TV ads than the other guy.
No, not at all.
It was because they utilized a taut digital network.
Right. They didn't just broadcast a message saying, send us money. They built a digital infrastructure that allowed supporters to see what their peers were doing.
Yeah.
They utilized microtransactions. They had these instantly updated fundraising thermometers and really peer-to-peer social pressure.
Oh, the social pressure is huge.
Yeah, when you donated, you could immediately share that action with your network, triggering your friends to do the exact same thing. It was this highly leveraged, tightly connected web of people who were communicating not just with the campaign headquarters, but with each other.
It's the difference between throwing a wet sponge against a wall versus plucking a highly tensioned guitar string. The vibration travels instantly. That's a taut network. And this is a massive but here, the tools themselves are fundamentally useless on their own.
Oh, this is where so many aspiring leaders and entrepreneurs completely fail. They mistake the microphone for the message.
Yes. Having a Twitter account or a Substack or, a TikTok channel that doesn't make you a leader any more than owning a scalpel makes you a neurosurgeon.
I love that analogy.
The tools don't create the movement.
Because the internet is literally littered with beautifully designed websites and perfectly optimized social media accounts that have absolutely zero cultural gravity. They're ghosts. If tools like blogs or social media are just the megaphone, the actual acoustic energy that goes into that microphone has to be a genuine desire for change. It has to be an authentic passion to serve the tribe.
Let's look at Gary Vaynerchuk.
Great example.
Right. Before he was this massive global media mogul, he was just running his family's liquor store in New Jersey. And he started Wine Library TV on early YouTube. And he built a massive, fiercely loyal tribe of wine enthusiasts, millions of people tuning in.
And if you look at the mechanics of what he was doing in those early days, he fundamentally subverted the traditional business model. The traditional model would be to use that video platform to just market his inventory.
Like, here's a Cabernet, it's on sale for $14.99, click the link to buy.
Exactly. But he didn't do that. He explicitly did not market to his audience. He led them.
Marketing to an audience is an extraction of value, right? It's transactional. Leading a tribe is an injection of value. It's an act of generosity. Gary Vaynerchuk narrated their shared passion for wine.
Yeah, he tasted wines. He spat them out in a bucket on camera. He talked about notes of dirt and old socks. I mean, he demystified a subject that was historically incredibly elitist and top-down.
He gave his audience a vocabulary to express something they already loved.
Precisely. He helped people discover new things and understand their own palates better. It was never a marketing stunt. It was the fuel for a movement. He didn't push them toward a cash register. He led them toward a deeper appreciation of the craft. And because he did that, the tribe naturally wanted to support him.
And leadership doesn't just look like a loud, charismatic guy on YouTube. It applies just as heavily to the internal mechanics of a corporate behemoth. Take Mick Matthews. She was the senior vice president of Microsoft's Central Marketing Group.
Yeah, most people have never heard of Mitch Matthews. She wasn't a public pundit touring the globe or writing bestsellers. But she led a tribe of thousands of marketers inside Microsoft.
Which is no small feat. Microsoft at the time was a massive, highly siloed, often bureaucratic machine.
Oh, absolutely.
Hmm.
But she managed to forge a dynamic, change-making internal tribe. And she didn't do it by simply issuing memos from the executive suite. She did it by creating a shared vision for what marketing at Microsoft could actually be. And she gave those internal employees a way to connect and communicate their shared frustrations and aspirations.
She proved that you don't need a public stage to lead. You can incite a movement entirely behind closed doors if you just understand the mechanics. So if you're listening to this right now, the immediate shift in perspective you need to adopt is this. You cannot wait to be anointed.
No, you really can't.
You cannot wait for the CEO or the board of directors or some algorithm to tap you on the shoulder and grant you official permission to lead. You just have to look at the network you are sitting in right now.
Ask yourself, what change can I help these specific people achieve? How can I serve them? Because the moment you decide to help them achieve that change, you stop being a passive node in the network and you step into leadership.
But the second you do that, you're going to run headfirst into a brick wall. And that wall is the legacy of the factory. We really need to spend some time defining what this means, because understanding the factory is the only way to understand why your workplace probably feels so suffocating.
Yeah, when we talk about the factory, we aren't talking about physical smokestacks or literal assembly lines, though that is obviously where the model was born. The factory is an entire organizational psychology.
Right.
It is any environment that is obsessively built to crank out a predictable product or service, to focus exclusively on measurable output, and to relentlessly minimize costs and variances.
It's the ultimate status quo machine. In a factory environment, the people at the top dictate exactly what to do and exactly how to do it. The only metric of success for the worker is compliance. Did you follow the manual? Did you hit your quota?
And for about a century, from the Industrial Revolution through the late 1900s, that model was an absolute goldmine. If you could build a better factory, you won. But three massive tectonic shifts have completely fractured that foundation. The factory model is literally dying in real time.
Let's break down those three shifts, because they explain so much about the current economy.
Okay, so the first shift is internal. It's happening inside the psychology of the workforce itself. For generations, the deal was super simple. You give the factory your compliance. The factory gives you a stable paycheck and a pension. You trade your soul from 9 to 5, and you live your actual life on the weekends.
Which sounds bleak, but that was the deal.
It was. But that psychological tolerance for brain-dead compliance has just plummeted.
Right. People have woken up to the mathematical reality of their lifespans. They realize they spend a massive percentage of their waking hours at work. And the idea of just cashing a paycheck, waiting for the weekend, waiting to retire, or honestly just waiting to get laid off in the next corporate restructuring, it's soul-crushing. People are demanding meaning.
They want to care.
They are realizing that working on something they actually believe in is infinitely more satisfying than just surviving a commute.
Which leads to the second shift, which is purely economic. The organizations themselves are staring at spreadsheets and realizing that the factory model simply isn't highly profitable anymore.
Because in a globalized world, someone, somewhere, can always build average widgets cheaper than you can.
Exactly. If your entire business model is producing average goods for average people at scale, you are in a race to the bottom. The margins are shrinking to zero. The factory model relies on the scarcity of distribution, scarcity of shelf space.
And the internet destroyed that scarcity.
Completely. And that triggers the third shift, which is consumer-driven. The market has fundamentally changed its palette. Consumers are actively rejecting factory-produced commodities.
Yeah.
They don't want the same off-the-shelf, mass-marketed garbage that everyone else has.
They want bespoke experiences. They want stories.
Yes. They want to spend their money on things that align with their identity and their values.
Yeah. So you have this incredible trifecta of collapse. The workers want purpose, the old financial model is bankrupt, and the consumers want meaning. The factory system is objectively broken, but, and here's the great paradox of modern business, we still operate as if it's perfectly intact. We are absolutely terrified of change.
We really are. And we need to explain why we are terrified, because it's not some personal failing. It is programming.
Let's unpack that.
Fear of change was a highly selected survival mechanism in the factory era. Think about a literal assembly line producing automobiles in 1950. The line is perfectly optimized. Every single second is accounted for. If a worker on the line suddenly decides to be, creative and try a new way of attaching a door, what happens?
The line stops, the machine breaks, and millions of dollars are lost.
Exactly. Change introduces risk, inefficiency, and catastrophic cost. So for 100 years, management spent billions of dollars conditioning employees to view change as the enemy. We built HR departments, compliance manuals, performance reviews, all designed to weed out variance. We bred the fear of change right into the corporate DNA.
But today, the environment has entirely flipped. The fear that used to protect the organization from inefficiency is now the exact thing preventing the organization from surviving.
Precisely.
Let's make this concrete. Imagine the mindset of an executive at a company like Blockbuster Video or Sears or AOL in the early 2000s. These were massive, incredibly successful factories, and they were obsessed with maintaining their legacy models. They were optimizing the layout of the candy aisles or sending out millions of CD-ROMs in the mail, relentlessly defending the status quo while the entire tectonic plate of the internet just shifted beneath them.
They perfectly executed the factory playbook right up until the exact moment they went bankrupt. Now, Contrast that legacy mindset with someone like Jonathan Ive at Apple.
Oh, Jonathan Ive is the archetype of what we call the heretic.
Yes, a heretic is someone who looks at the accepted dogma of an industry and says, this is wrong and I see a better way. Jonathan Ive didn't just manage a team of industrial designers to make beige plastic boxes slightly cheaper to manufacture. He acted as a heretic.
He challenged the fundamental assumption of what a computer was supposed to look like, how it was supposed to feel, and what it actually meant to the person using it. He fed the Macintosh tribe with radical design ideas, and because the tribe was hungry for meaning, they just embraced it.
Another great example is Micah Sifry. He co-founded the Personal Democracy Forum. He looked at the intersection of technology and politics and realized the old broadcast model of campaigning was dying. He didn't just write a boring white paper about it, he built a platform.
He acted as a heretic to the traditional political establishment.
Exactly. He brought a tribe of technologists, activists, and politicians together to completely rewire how civic engagement works in the digital age. The heretic steps out in front of the crowd and challenges the norms. And this is the most important economic reality of our time. The marketplace now actively, aggressively rewards heretics.
Which is such a massive shift.
Huge. In the factory era, heretics were burned at the stake. I mean, they were fired, marginalized, or blacklisted because they threatened the efficiency of the machine. Today, the market embraces them because heretics are the only ones capable of producing the remarkable, novel products that consumers are actually starving for.
Okay, I need to jump in here and wrestle with this because I can hear the listeners screaming at their phone right now.
Fair enough. Let's hear it.
It is very easy to point to an Apple designer and say, be a heretic, be creative. Apple pays people to be creative. But let's ground this in reality. Let's say our listener works in a highly regulated, rigidly bureaucratic environment. They work in regional banking or insurance compliance or local government. The environment is objectively toxic to innovation. If they walk into work on Monday and start acting like a heretic, challenging the dogma of the VP of operations, well, they aren't going to start a movement. They are going to get fired by 2 p.m.
It is a totally valid pushback,
Mm.
and it highlights a crucial distinction between mindless disruption and strategic leadership.
Yep.
If you act like a heretic just for the sake of being loud, if you just run around breaking things without a vision or a genuine connection to the people you are trying to serve, yes, the immune system of the organization will attack you, and you will be fired.
So how does a heretic actually survive in a rigid system?
By identifying the leverage points. Even in the most rigid environments, the factory rules exist purely to maintain the status quo. The true heretic learns the system well enough to find the gaps in it. Let's go back to our hypothetical Blockbuster manager in 2005.
Yeah.
If their boss says, optimize the candy aisle, and the manager says, no, candy's stupid, I'm tearing down the shelves, they get fired, that's disruption without leadership.
Right, that's just insubordination.
But if that manager recognizes that their core, loyal customers are getting frustrated with late fees and that these customers actually just love talking about movies, what if that manager quietly starts hosting an after-hours indie film discussion group right there in the store?
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. What if they start curating staff recommendation sections that highlight weird, obscure cinema instead of just the top 10 blockbusters? They are operating within the physical constraints of the store, but they are fundamentally shifting the energy from a transactional factory into a community hub. They are leading a local tribe.
And if the corporate overlords fire them for that?
Then the harsh truth is, they were just in the wrong room. If an environment is so toxic that it punishes any attempt to add genuine value to the tribe, the first and most necessary act of leadership is to leave. You cannot lead a movement from inside a prison cell if the warden has thrown away the key.
Wow, yeah.
But more often than not, organizations are so desperate for growth that if you can quietly prove that your heretical approach yields better engagement, deeper loyalty, or higher energy, they will eventually co-opt it.
This friction, we were talking about the friction between maintaining the candy aisle and building a film community. It really brings us to what I think is the absolute heartbeat of this entire deep dive. We have to clearly separate two words that the business world constantly uses as synonyms, but which are actually entirely different paradigms: management and leadership.
Oh, this is so important. We use them interchangeably, but they are practically opposites in execution. Management is the manipulation of resources to achieve a known outcome. It's about taking a pre-existing process, analyzing it, and figuring out how to get it done faster, cheaper, and with fewer errors.
So a manager is handed a goal by someone higher up, and they are given a budget and a team, and their job is to use authority to enforce compliance to hit that goal.
Exactly. Management is fundamentally about control. Let's look at the classic I Love Lucy episode, where Lucy and Ethel are working at the chocolate factory.
Yes, they're standing at the conveyor belt wrapping individual chocolates.
It's one of the greatest pieces of physical comedy ever filmed. The belt starts moving a little too fast, and they can't keep up, so they start stuffing the chocolates into their hats, down their shirts, into their mouths.
It's hilarious, but it is also the perfect crystallized visual of a pure management problem. Think about the mechanics of that scene. The task is totally known: wrap the candy in paper. The resources are known: two workers, Lucy and Ethel. The goal is pure efficiency. Wrap as much candy as possible in the shortest amount of time. When the speed of the belt increases beyond their physical capacity, the management system catastrophically breaks down.
But notice what is completely absent from that scene.
Yeah.
There's absolutely zero opportunity for leadership. Lucy and Ethel aren't trying to change what the candy is made of. They aren't questioning why they're wrapping it or who is going to eat it or if wrapping candy is even a worthwhile use of a human life. They are just frantically trying to manage a breaking process.
That is the essence of management. Managers make widgets faster. Leaders, on the other hand, make change. Leadership is about navigating the unknown. It's about creating a reality that you actually believe in, a reality that doesn't exist yet. And the reason we are so obsessed with management over leadership goes back centuries. It originates in the monarchy model.
Relation to the king.
Exactly. For generations, corporate structures were literally modeled after royal courts. You have the CEO sitting on the throne as the king. Below the king, you have the lords and barons, the VPs and directors, and at the bottom, you have the peasants.
And the primary directive of a monarchy is self-preservation. The goal of the corporation was to enrich the king and maintain absolute, unshakable stability so the king could stay in power. Kings don't lead movements, they quell rebellions. Kings use power, authority, and the threat of exile to enforce compliance.
And for a long time, in a world where consumers didn't have many options, it was a highly profitable model. It was great to be king.
But the king is dead.
Uh,
And what killed him? The evolution of marketing and storytelling.
When marketing evolved beyond just listing the features of a product and started telling compelling stories that resonated with consumers' identities, it freed the tribe. When consumers have unlimited choices and when they hear a narrative that actually aligns with their worldview, they realize they don't have to pledge allegiance to the local king anymore.
If the tribe doesn't like the king's product or his politics or his environmental record, they don't have to stage a bloody coup. They simply click a different link. They take their money, their time, and their attention elsewhere. The king is powerless without an audience.
And this has completely inverted what the market values. In the era of the king, stability was the highest virtue. If a company's logo said established 1906, that was a massive badge of honor. It communicated safety. It told the consumer, we aren't going anywhere. We are reliable.
But today, established 1906 is practically a warning label. It's a liability. To a modern consumer, it translates to, we are old, we are slow, we are burdened by legacy infrastructure, and we probably don't understand the modern world. The market today actively thirsts for the new.
The automotive industry provides a brilliant historical lens for this.
Oh, absolutely. If you look back a few decades, you had companies trying to bring entirely novel, quirky cars to the U.S. market. Cars like the Yugo, the Renault, or the Sterling, they brought entirely new ideas, and they failed catastrophically.
Because the drivers in that specific era, the consumers of the late 20th century, they still wanted the illusion of the factory. They wanted safety, reliability, and stability. They wanted a massive steel box built by Ford or General Motors because they knew Ford wasn't going to disappear overnight. Novelty was viewed as a huge risk.
But look at the market dynamics today. Look at the Tesla Roadster. When Tesla launched that car, it was a $100,000 electric sports car built by a Silicon Valley startup with virtually zero manufacturing history. 30 years ago, selling that car would have been mathematically impossible.
Or look at the Toyota Prius. It took a century-old, deeply entrenched combustion engine industry, flipped it entirely upside down, and became a massive cultural status symbol.
These vehicles succeeded not because they were the safest or most established options, but precisely because today's partisans, the early adopters, and the modern consumers, they actually relish change. They want to be part of the disruption. They want to fund the heretics.
So, to use an analogy, traditional management is kind of like playing defense in a sport where the rule book keeps changing overnight. You are just on the field, exhausted, trying to hold the line, optimize your blocking schemes, and prevent the other team from scoring. You are entirely reactive.
Right.
Whereas leadership is saying, this game is broken, I'm attempting a totally new game over here in this other field, and it's so much fun that my team and the fans actually want to play it.
That's a perfect synthesis.
But again, I want to challenge this on behalf of the listener. Let's say you are a middle manager right now. You oversee a team of 12 people. Do you need to go in tomorrow, throw your Excel spreadsheets in the trash, and stop managing altogether? I mean, is management inherently evil?
No, management isn't evil. It is just structurally insufficient for growth. The core insight here isn't that management should be eradicated. It's that you absolutely cannot manage your way to a movement. If you need to process 1,000 payroll checks by Friday, you need management. You need spreadsheets and compliance.
Yeah, please don't be a heretic with my payroll.
Exactly. But if you want to grow, if you want to innovate, if you want your team to actually care about the work they're doing, you have to shift gears into leadership.
Because managers rely on authority derived from the factory hierarchy. Like, do this because I'm your boss and I can fire you. Leaders rely on passion, vision, and ideas. Do this because it matters and we can build something incredible together.
A great manager ensures the trains run on time. But a leader is the one who looks at the map and decides where the tracks should be built in the first place.
So the deeply practical takeaway for you this week is to ruthlessly evaluate your own calendar. Look at your daily tasks. What percentage of your week is spent simply managing a process you've seen 100 times before? And what percentage of your week is dedicated to actively leading people toward a change you actually believe in?
And if you make the decision to increase that second percentage, if you decide you're going to lead people, you have to fundamentally rethink how you communicate with them, because the old top-down broadcast model won't work. Which brings us to the myth of authority and the incredible power of sideways communication.
Yes, let's dive deep into this. This is where the mechanics get incredibly empowering. We need to completely shatter the myth that you need formal authority to lead. Think back to our definition of a tribe, a shared interest and a way to communicate. Notice what word is missing from that formula.
Authority.
Authority.
Not only is authority missing, but in a highly connected digital world, formal authority can actually get in the way of building a true tribe. Because authority relies on coercion. Tribes rely on voluntary connection.
True tribes do not just thrive on communication flowing down from the leader to the followers. That's a broadcast. That's a college lecture. True tribes thrive on the density of their sideways communication. Tribe member communicating with tribe member.
If we look at network theory, a network where every node only connects to the center is incredibly brittle. If the center fails, the whole network dies. But a mesh network where the nodes are densely connected to one another is incredibly resilient and powerful. And the Grateful Dead are arguably the greatest case study in building a mesh network in modern cultural history.
Let's break down the mechanics of the Grateful Dead, because they didn't succeed by following the traditional music industry factory model. They weren't churning out 3-minute pop songs to get on Top 40 radio.
Right. The traditional music industry model is pure top-down broadcast. The label makes a record, they pay the radio station to play it, the fan hears it alone in their car, and they go buy the record. The fan never interacts with another fan. The Grateful Dead bypassed that entirely.
They realized that their live concerts weren't just a delivery mechanism for music. The concert was a physical platform for sideways communication.
Exactly. They created an environment where people didn't just come to hear the band, they came to hear the music together.
And they actively encouraged fans to record their live shows and trade the cassette tapes with each other, which is wild. In the traditional factory model, giving away your product for free is corporate suicide. It's theft.
But the Grateful Dead understood that the tape trading network was the ultimate engine of sideways communication. A fan in New York would mail a tape to a fan in California. They would write letters. They would form relationships. The band wasn't the sole source of value. The band was merely the excuse for the tribe to gather and connect with each other.
It's the difference between that boring college lecture where all the energy is focused on the professor at the front of the room versus hosting a legendary dinner party.
Oh, I love the dinner party analogy.
Right. As the host of the dinner party, you provide the food, the drinks, and the space. But if it's a truly great party, you eventually fade into the background, and the guests end up talking to each other way more than they talk to you. The host's job is just to lower the friction for those sideways connections to happen.
And we see this exact same dynamic playing out in the restaurant industry. Take a place called Jack in Brooklyn, run by a couple named Danielle and Dave.
This is a brilliant example of subverting the factory model of hospitality.
Traditional restaurants operate on a factory model of foot traffic. You open the doors, you turn on the neon sign, and you just pray that enough anonymous strangers walk in off the street to cover your overhead. It's highly stressful, low margin, and heavily reliant on external marketing. Danielle and Dave didn't do that. They only opened their restaurant occasionally, maybe 20 times a year.
And instead of seeking anonymous diners, they essentially threw a private party for the people who already read their food blog.
They used the restaurant as a central clearinghouse for their existing digital tribe to physically interact. Because they facilitated that sideways communication, they completely eliminated the risk. They didn't have to guess how many steaks to buy, they didn't have to pay for advertising, and they didn't have to cater to the average palate of a random passerby.
They got to cook highly specific, remarkable dishes for a tight-knit tribe that already trusted them.
By building the platform for the tribe to connect, they guaranteed their own success.
But let me push back again, putting myself in the shoes of someone working inside a massive corporation. Let's say I'm an entry-level analyst. I'm at the bottom of the food chain. I'm listening to this and I say, okay, I'm going to build a platform for sideways communication. So I start an unofficial internal newsletter or I launch a rogue Slack channel and I start organizing my peers across different departments to push for a more flexible remote work policy or a new software initiative. Isn't the VP of Human Resources just going to view that as a mutiny?
It's a very real fear. And the harsh reality is some legacy managers will absolutely view it as a mutiny.
Yeah.
But you have to understand two things. First, true leadership requires a tolerance for risk. Change is almost always made by asking for forgiveness later, not by begging for permission first. If you wait for the HR department to officially sanction your movement, you will be waiting until the end of time.
Because HR is built to protect the factory.
Exactly. But the second, much more important point is this. Beneath the crust of all that bureaucracy, most large organizations are secretly desperate for someone to step up.
They know it's not working.
The executives know the company is stagnating. They know the factory model is failing. They are just too paralyzed by legacy systems to fix it themselves. If you take the risk and you successfully lead a movement that solves a real problem, if your rogue Slack channel actually increases cross-departmental collaboration and speeds up project delivery, the smart people at the top aren't going to fire you. They're going to promote you.
Because true leadership is the scarcest resource in the modern economy, and scarcity dictates value.
Exactly. The people who get fired are the ones who just complain. The people who get promoted are the ones who organize the tribe to build the solution.
So the mandate here is clear. Stop waiting for the promotion to start leading. Look at your peers, your customers, or your local community. Ask yourself, what platform can I build right now to give these people a space to talk to each other about our shared passion? Lower the friction for them to connect.
Which naturally leads us to the final piece of the puzzle. If you understand the anatomy of a tribe and you understand the power of sideways communication, how do you actually execute? What is the step-by-step playbook for inciting a movement?
The movement playbook. It basically boils down to 3 core actions: motivate, connect, and leverage.
And we have to be very precise about what these words mean in this context. You do not incite a movement by commanding people. You cannot just stand on a soapbox and yell logical instructions at a crowd and expect them to move. We've established that the megaphone isn't enough.
Right. If logic and facts were enough to change human behavior, nobody would smoke cigarettes and everyone would have a perfectly funded retirement account.
Exactly. Human beings do not mobilize based on data. They mobilize based on emotion and peer support. So the first step, motivate, is about transforming a passive shared interest into a passionate, urgent goal. The second step, connect, is about providing the tools to tighten the communications, building that mesh network. And the third step, leverage, is about allowing the tribe to use its collective weight to grow and enact change.
I think the most profound insight here is the mechanism of peer support. A movement happens when the peer network provides the psychological safety net for people to do what they already secretly knew was the right thing to do. It's not about brainwashing people with new information. It's about giving them the social permission to act on their existing beliefs.
Let's look at 2 massive global issues to illustrate this: microfinance and global warming. We have 2 Nobel Prize winners, Muhammad Yunus and Al Gore. What's fascinating about both of their journeys is the time delay. Muhammad Yunus had the mathematical and economic answer for microfinance 30 years ago. He knew it worked.
And the scientific data regarding global warming has been established for decades. So why did it take so long for these ideas to actually gain cultural traction?
Because they spent years just broadcasting the facts. And
Mhm.
facts don't start movements. It wasn't until the strategy shifted from broadcasting data to inciting peer-to-peer connection that things changed. A movement requires people talking to one another. When Al Gore released An Inconvenient Truth, the genius wasn't just the documentary itself, it was the training program he built alongside it.
He trained thousands of people to give his presentation in their own local communities.
He decentralized the message. He relied on peer support networks to form locally, because people are far more likely to change their behavior when their neighbor talks to them than when a politician on a screen tells them to.
We see this exact same playbook executed perfectly in the tech world with Nicholas Zenstrom and the creation of Skype. Let's look at the sheer scale of what Skype was trying to do. Their goal was to overthrow the global telecommunications monopoly. They wanted to make international phone calls free.
If you approach that problem with a factory mindset, it's impossible. A tiny startup in Europe cannot raise enough capital to lay underwater cables, launch satellites, and fight the lobbying power of AT&T or Vodafone. If Zenstrom tried to command an army to fight that war, he would have been crushed in a week.
So he didn't fight them on their turf. He leveraged the edge of the network.
He empowered the tribe. He built software that utilized peer-to-peer architecture. Skype didn't host all the calls on massive, expensive central servers. The software used the spare computing power of the user's own computers to route the calls.
He gave the tribe the tool, and he let them spread the word themselves.
By providing the ultimate tool for sideways communication-free global voice chat, the tribe executed the movement for him. Every new user made the network stronger, and the peer-to-peer architecture bypassed the telecommunication monopolies entirely.
It reminds me of trying to start the wave in a massive sports stadium.
Okay, let's hear it.
If you want 50,000 people to do the wave, you can't just hack into the stadium PA system, stand on the 50-yard line with a microphone, and order everyone to stand up on the count of 3. It will fail miserably. People will just stare at you.
Right, because that's top-down command. It's awkward.
To successfully start the wave, you have to look like an absolute idiot for a few seconds. You stand up, throw your arms in the air, and scream. But you aren't trying to reach 50,000 people. You are trying to get the 5 people sitting immediately next to you so incredibly energized and amused that they stand up with you.
Yes.
And once you have 6 people doing it, the 10 people in the next section see the localized energy, and they feel the social pull to join in. The peer-to-peer connection carries the momentum around the entire stadium. You initiate it, but the network executes it.
That is a phenomenal analogy for tribal leverage. And it brings up a deeply counterintuitive truth about building a network. When people hear leverage and growth, they immediately think bigger is always better. But the mechanics of a movement dictate that density is far more important than sheer size.
This is the comparison between the massive American Automobile Association, the AAA, and the relatively tiny TED conference.
If you look at AAA, it has tens of millions of members. It is a massive, sprawling network. But it's completely quiet. It has almost zero cultural kinetic energy.
Why? Because you don't join AAA to change the world. You join AAA because you want a tow truck when your battery dies. It is entirely transactional. It is a crowd, not a tribe.
A massive list of disconnected nodes.
Exactly. Now compare that to the TED conference, especially in its earlier, more exclusive days. At the time of this writing, TED had maybe a few thousand core attendees. But that tiny, hyper-dense network created a massive amount of cultural impact, spurred incredible innovations, and shifted global conversations.
Because it was incredibly tight. The people in that network communicated constantly, they shared a deep identity, and the sideways communication was off the charts.
This is the trap that almost every aspiring leader falls into. They launch a project, and they immediately start chasing pure vanity numbers. They want 1 million followers, a massive email list, a huge headcount, and to get those numbers, they inevitably water down their message. They try to appeal to the average masses.
And in doing so, they build a AAA instead of building TED. They build a crowd of apathetic spectators instead of a tight tribe of passionate partisans.
The playbook demands that you resist the urge to chase size over density. A tight tribe, one that communicates quickly with high emotion and alacrity, is infinitely more powerful than a massive, quiet crowd. A crowd is just a tribe without a leader and without a communication infrastructure.
So how do you practically resist that urge? If the internet is constantly telling you to optimize for maximum reach, how do you focus on density?
You focus relentlessly on the narrative. The playbook says you must tell a compelling, highly specific story about who you are, what you value, and the exact future you are trying to build. You do not compromise that story for mass appeal. You connect the people who resonate deeply with that specific narrative.
And then finally, you give them something to do. You give them a mission with as few limits as possible. If your narrative is strong and unapologetic, the right people will magnetize toward it, and the wrong people, the people who would just dilute the culture anyway, they will leave. And them leaving actually makes the tribe tighter and stronger.
That is the ultimate practical takeaway. Don't obsess over acquiring 1 million passive followers by the end of the year. Focus on the story. Find the 10 or 50 or 100 people who already care deeply about the change you want to make. Connect them to each other. Give them a task. Motivate, connect, leverage. Look like an idiot starting the wave in your own specific section of the stadium and let the peer support take over.
We have covered a truly massive amount of structural terrain today. Let's pull all these threads together and synthesize the absolute core insight of this deep dive.
Let's do it.
If we look at the historical arc of everything we've unpacked, from the evolution of the factory to the mechanics of digital networks, the central, undeniable reality is this. The era of the predictable, stable, top-down factory is over. It is a relic of the 20th century, and it is never coming back.
We are living in an entirely new epoch. We live in an age of unprecedented, frictionless leverage, where the tools to build a taut network and facilitate sideways communication are essentially free and universally available to anyone with a smartphone.
And because the infrastructure has changed, the economic and cultural dynamics have permanently shifted. The market actively punishes the boring, the safe, and the managers who simply want to optimize the status quo. The market exclusively rewards the heretics, the innovators, and the leaders who are willing to take the risk to incite a movement.
Which means the playing field is completely leveled. Anyone sitting anywhere in any organization has the mechanical capacity to incite a movement. You do not need a massive R&D budget, you do not need permission from the executive board, and you certainly don't need formal authority.
The only thing missing from this equation isn't a better title on your business card. It isn't a larger marketing budget. The only thing missing is a leader who is willing to step up, endure the initial friction, and connect the people who are already out there, just waiting to be brought together. The mechanics are proven, the tools are lying right there on the ground, the tribes are waiting.
Now that you know you have the absolute power and the exact tools to turn a stuck, stagnant group into a dynamic, world-changing movement, the real question isn't can you lead? The question is, will you overcome the deeply ingrained, factory-installed fear that's been programmed into you since childhood? We'll explore exactly how to dismantle the psychology of that fear in our next deep dive.
So, what if the biggest obstacle to your success isn't actually your boss or your budget or even your job title? What if it's, your own deeply ingrained belief that you need permission to make a difference?
Oh, that's such a huge question. Because we are all just waiting, right?
Right. We're waiting to be ordained as a leader. But are you ready to actually instigate a movement right from where you are sitting today?
I mean, it really is the defining tension of the modern workplace. We spend, honestly, our entire careers just staring at the organizational chart.
Just waiting for someone above us to hand down a map.
Exactly. We just assume that until we have the right title, our hands are tied. But the whole terrain of the economy has completely shifted under our feet. That old map. It's utterly useless now.
Which is exactly the premise of our deep dives today. We're looking at a stack of sources focused on this concept called leading from the bottom. And the core mission of this deep dive is to really deconstruct how anyone, and I mean anyone, regardless of their rank, can take a disconnected, kind of apathetic group of people and transform them into a passionate, tight-knit tribe.
And this matters so immensely for you listening, whether you're, an aspiring entrepreneur, or maybe a mid-level manager at some massive corporation.
Or even just someone who is desperate to have a career that actually means something. The rules have totally changed.
They really have. The traditional top-down factory model of authority is basically dying.
Yeah. Today, the market exclusively rewards those who can instigate change. It doesn't care at all where your name sits on the payroll. So we're going to break down the actual mechanics of how you transition from being a compliant worker to becoming the true leader of a tribe.
And to really grasp the magnitude of this shift, we have to understand the invisible water we all been swimming in.
The factory model.
Right. The sources refer to it as the factory model. And we shouldn't just think of a factory as like a literal brick building with smokestacks and assembly lines. Sure. In this context, a factory is any organization. So, a hospital, an insurance agency, a software firm that is just obsessed with measurable output, reducing costs, and enforcing compliance.
It's basically any environment where a boss hands you a manual and says, do exactly this over and over and do not deviate.
Exactly. And the crazy thing is, we actually loved that model for a really long time.
We did. It wasn't forced on us. We flocked to it.
Yeah.
Because if you think about the last 100 years, the factory model offered this incredibly seductive deal. In exchange for your compliance and your 8 hours a day, the factory gave you stability.
It gave you a pension.
Right. And most importantly, it gave you an escape from the terrifying responsibility of having to take initiative. You could just put your head down.
You are hitting on the psychological core of the whole issue right there. The factory model provided total deniability.
Oh, that's such a good point.
Right. If the product failed or, the market shifted or the company just went bankrupt, the worker on the floor could just throw their hands up and say, hey, don't look at me. I just pulled the lever I was told to pull.
It's not my fault.
Exactly. That deniability is incredibly comfortable. The problem is, well, that era is just over.
Yeah, that advantage has totally evaporated.
Because those compliant, rule-following jobs, they're the easiest ones to outsource to cheaper labor markets. Or just automate entirely with software.
Right. The organizations of the future do not need compliant cogs. They're desperate for smart, fast, flexible people who are actually on a mission.
And that requires leadership from everywhere in the organization, not just the C-suite.
So, okay, I understand the theory,
Hmm.
but in practice, this clashes violently with what our sources call the myth of authority.
Oh, absolutely.
Because we've been conditioned since kindergarten to believe that leadership is this, like ordination. The teacher makes you line leader.
Right.
Or the CEO promotes you to vice president. We view leadership like being the captain of a massive cruise ship.
That's a great analogy.
You stand on the bridge, you pull a giant brass lever, you have the official authority, and therefore the whole ship turns. But if I'm sitting in a cubicle on the third floor of a logistics firm, I don't have that lever.
No, you don't.
I don't have the authority to command anyone to do anything. So how does this actually work without just, turning into a chaotic workplace rebellion?
Well, to understand the mechanics of leading without that brass lever, we have to ruthlessly separate two words that corporate culture just loves to conflate.
Okay, what are they?
Management and leadership.
Ah.
They are not synonyms. Not at all. Management is about manipulating resources to get a known job done. And look, managers are essential.
Sure. If you own a global chain of fast food restaurants, you desperately need managers.
Yes. You need them to ensure that every single hamburger is cooked exactly the same way, as cheaply and safely as possible. Managers use the authority granted to them by the factory to enforce compliance. They basically say, follow the manual or I will use my authority to fire you.
So they're guarding the status quo. They're optimizing a process that has already been invented.
Precisely. But here's the catch. A manager cannot mandate a breakthrough.
Right.
You can't just point to an employee and say, I am using my authority to demand that you invent a radically new product by Thursday.
That would just cause panic.
Yeah. Management breaks down entirely when the goal requires genuine innovation. Leaders, conversely, they step into the vacuum created by the failure of the status quo.
Okay.
Leadership is entirely about creating change that you deeply believe in. Leaders don't use threats, they don't use bureaucracy.
Right.
Often they don't even have the power to fire anyone.
They just use passion and vision and ideas.
Exactly. Managers have employees, but leaders have followers. And in a market that demands constant, relentless change, having official authority can actually hinder true leadership.
Wait, really? Hinder it?
Yeah, because authority is inherently tied to preserving the very factory that needs to be disrupted.
Wow, okay.
Yeah.
I saw a case study in the source materials that perfectly illustrates this. It's the story of Thomas Barnett.
Oh, that's such a fantastic example.
But I'm not going to lie, I struggled to wrap my head around the practical application. Because the sources mention he was at the Pentagon.
Right.
And the United States military is the absolute pinnacle of top-down command and control hierarchy.
Yeah.
If you don't have the stars on your shoulder, nobody listens to you.
That's the assumption, yeah.
So what actually happened with Barnett? How did a guy with zero rank bypass that massive machine?
It's one of the most revealing examples in the material because it just strips away every excuse we have about needing a title.
Okay, set the scene for us.
So, in the aftermath of 9/11, the Pentagon was basically in a state of institutional shock.
Right, their whole paradigm shifted.
Completely. Their entire Cold War era map of the world,
Yeah.
nation states, conventional armies, predictable threats had essentially just burned to the ground.
Yeah.
They were trying to fight a decentralized, network-based enemy using this rigid top-down hierarchy. And Thomas Burnett was just a 41-year-old researcher at the Naval War College.
He wasn't a general.
Not at all. He had no status, no troops to command, and absolutely zero official authority to mandate policy changes.
So he's basically just a civilian academic sitting in a cubicle inside the ultimate military bureaucracy.
Yes, but Barnett understood something crucial. He understood the specific language and the cultural mechanisms of the Pentagon.
Okay.
He knew that the military communicates via briefings, so he didn't try to write a best-selling book or stage a protest outside. He built a PowerPoint presentation.
A PowerPoint.
Yes, but it wasn't, a standard bullet point snooze fest. It was a massive 3-hour, highly visual mapping of the new geopolitical world.
3 hours.
3 hours. The sources actually describe it as feeling more like performance art than a military briefing.
Okay, I have to stop you there. A 3-hour PowerPoint sounds like a literal weapon of mass boredom.
It really does.
How does a 3-hour slide deck instigate a movement?
Well, because of the how and the why behind the slides, Barnett didn't use the presentation to issue commands. He couldn't anyway.
Right.
Instead, he used it to provide a completely new narrative framework for a group of people who were just desperate for one. He visually separated the world into what he called the functioning core and the non-integrating gap.
Okay.
He gave the military a new way to understand their purpose in this chaotic era. And remember, he didn't have the rank to force any general to attend this thing.
Right, he couldn't just send a calendar invite and make it mandatory.
No, he simply started giving the briefing to literally anyone who would listen. And because the ideas were so resonant, because he injected this dry, bureaucratic environment with actual soul and vision word spreads.
So people actually wanted to sit through it.
Yeah. Junior officers told mid-level commanders, who then told generals. He galvanized a tribe of forward-thinking people inside the military who were already yearning for a new direction, but they just lacked the vocabulary to articulate it.
So he didn't even create the desire for change. He just gave a voice and a structure to a desire that was already latent in the building.
That is the exact mechanism.
He acted as the catalyst.
Right. One man with zero official authority became a central figure in fundamentally altering how the modern military views its structure and its enemies.
That's wild.
He proved that skill, deep understanding of the environment, and an unrelenting attitude are essential. But official authority, it's completely optional.
He didn't ask permission.
No, he didn't ask permission to change the Pentagon. He just started leading a tribe that was sitting there waiting for a leader.
Okay, but that brings up a massive psychological barrier, though. Because the practical takeaway here is supposed to be, stop waiting for the right job title, start leading your peers using your ideas.
Right.
But if I'm being completely honest, doing what Barnett did requires a terrifying amount of vulnerability.
Oh, absolutely.
Because if he gave that 3-hour presentation and a 4-star general stood up and said, "This is absolute garbage, who let this researcher in here?" his career could have been ruined.
Which is exactly why the sources introduced this really fascinating update to a classic business theory. It explains this exact hesitation. You're familiar with the Peter Principle.
Right, Dr. Lawrence Peters' idea. Let's unpack that for a second to make sure we're on the same page.
Sure.
So the classic Peter Principle basically says that in any hierarchy, an employee will continue to be promoted as long as they are competent.
Right.
Which means they inevitably get promoted to a position where they're finally incompetent, and there they stay.
Exactly. The classic example is the best car salesperson on the lot.
Right.
They are incredible at selling cars. So management rewards them by making them the sales director.
Makes sense on paper.
But the skills required to sell a car to a customer are completely different from the skills required to manage a team, handle payroll, set strategy, all of that.
So the brilliant salesperson becomes a terrible, incompetent manager.
Yeah, and because they are bad at it, they never get promoted again. They are just stuck at their level of incompetence.
It honestly explains why so much of middle management feels completely inept. But you're saying the sources argue this principle has actually evolved.
Yeah, they argue that in the modern post-factory economy, incompetence isn't actually the primary ceiling anymore.
What is it then?
The revised version is that in every organization, everyone rises to the level at which they become paralyzed by fear.
Paralyzed by fear. Wow. So not a lack of skill, but a lack of nerve.
Yes. We are just terrified of challenging the status quo. I mean, we have deep biological wiring that tells us that standing out from the herd is incredibly dangerous.
Right.
And the sources make a really brilliant distinction here. We always claim we are afraid of failure, right? But that's mostly an excuse.
How so?
Well, if you work for a corporation, the organization usually absorbs the actual financial cost of a failed project. You don't lose your house if a marketing campaign flops.
That's true.
What we are truly viscerally terrified of is blame. We are terrified of the social isolation that comes from someone in authority pointing at us and saying, that was your idea and it was stupid.
So to avoid the mere possibility of blame, we proactively choose to hide.
Exactly.
We do exactly what is outlined in our job description. Nothing more, nothing less. We become what the text calls sheepwalkers.
Sheepwalkers.
We are physically awake, but intellectually asleep, just following the herd.
And stepping out of that sheepwalking state is the very first prerequisite of leadership. Barnett had to consciously overcome the fear of professional criticism to deliver that presentation.
He had to accept the risk.
He had to accept that blame was a distinct possibility and decide that the vision was simply worth the risk.
Okay, so if someone listening to this right now decides to swallow that fear, right? And they decide they are going to bypass the official hierarchy and lead a group from wherever they currently sit. How do they actually communicate with them? Because a leader without a megaphone needs a totally different strategy. If you don't have the authority to call a mandatory all-hands meeting, how do you actually get your ideas across?
So this is where we transition into the actual mechanics of tribal building, specifically what the sources define as the 4 directions of tribal communication.
Okay, let's get into it.
First, we have to stop thinking of a tribe as just a massive crowd of people.
Right.
A crowd is really just a demographic. A crowd has no leader and, crucially, no internal communication. But most traditional organizations waste millions of dollars trying to market to crowds.
Because they just want to reach everyone. They want the highest possible number of eyeballs on their thing.
But a tribe operates on completely different physics. A tribe only requires 2 elements to exist: a shared interest and a way to communicate.
Just those 2 things.
Yeah. And traditional managers fundamentally misunderstand that second element. Because of their factory training, they view communication strictly as a megaphone. Right. The CEO stands on a metaphorical balcony and shouts the corporate vision down to the masses.
That's the top-down model. Leader to tribe. It's broadcasting.
And in a factory, broadcasting is often the only communication allowed. Because, lateral communication might lead to unionization or distraction.
Oh, right.
But true tribal leaders facilitate communication in 4 distinct directions.
What are the 4?
The first is, of course, leader to tribe. You have to share the vision. The second is tribe to leader.
Feedback.
Exactly. There must be an active, responsive feedback loop where the leader actually listens to the fringes. The third is tribe member to outsider.
Okay.
This is the mechanism for growth. It's giving your members the tools to evangelize the shared interest to the rest of the world. But the 4th direction is the absolute most critical, and it's the one that traditional managers almost entirely ignore.
Which is?
Tribe member to tribe member.
Tribe member to tribe member. Okay, I want to try an analogy here to see if I'm grasping the mechanism.
Let's hear it.
So the traditional manager using a megaphone is like a stand-up comedian.
Oh, yeah.
The comedian stands on a lit stage, holding a microphone, talking in a dark room full of people. The crowd is only connected to the comedian. If the comedian stops talking, the event is over.
Right. Everyone goes home.
But a tribal leader is more like a great dinner party host.
I love that. How does the dinner host operate in this analogy?
Well, a great dinner host doesn't demand everyone's attention for the whole night. They curate the guest list based on a shared interest. They introduce 2 people at the party who have a lot in common. They pour them a drink, provide an appetizer, and then crucially, they step out of the way.
Yeah.
They just let those 2 guests talk to each other. The host's goal isn't to be the center of attention, right? The goal is to build a campfire where the guests bond with one another.
That is the exact mechanism. Your primary labor as a leader is to facilitate that campfire. And the sources provide a legendary example of this in the entertainment world: the Grateful Dead.
Oh, this is a great case study.
It is, because the music industry has historically operated purely on the comedian model, the megaphone.
Right.
Record labels broadcast a song on the radio, hoping a massive crowd buys the album. But the Grateful Dead subverted this entirely. They didn't just play music for their fans, they engineered an entire ecosystem where fans could experience the music together.
Right. The live concerts basically became a pilgrimage. But how do they actually engineer that tribe-to-tribe communication? Like, what were the physical mechanisms they used?
They did things that honestly baffled traditional music managers. For example, they explicitly allowed and even encouraged fans to tape their live shows.
Which, in a factory mindset, giving away your product for free is just corporate suicide.
Exactly. But the band realized that bootleg tapes were the currency of connection.
Oh, wow.
Fans had to talk to each other to trade tapes. They had to build networks. The band also managed their own ticketing, bypassing traditional vendors to ensure their core fans could always get in and sit together.
They created dedicated camping areas too, right?
Yeah, the lot culture, where fans would gather days before the show.
So they were building the physical and cultural infrastructure for the dinner party. And it created this totally impenetrable insider culture. I was actually reading in the sources how one deadhead could walk up to a total stranger in an airport, see a specific T-shirt, and just say 21470.
Referencing the date of a legendary concert.
Right, and it acted like a secret tribal handshake.
Yeah.
It immediately defined who they were and established this deep trust. That level of connection is biologically impossible if the fans are only listening to a megaphone.
Right. It only happens when the tribe members are communicating heavily with each other, completely independent of the leader.
And we see this exact same dynamic scaled down to modern local businesses too.
We do.
The sources highlight an occasional restaurant in Brooklyn called Jack, run by Danielle Sucher and Dave Turner.
Yes, that's a brilliant example.
It operates in total defiance of the traditional restaurant model.
Yeah.
Because a normal restaurant rents an expensive storefront, opens every night, and desperately tries to attract a crowd of anonymous strangers using a megaphone.
Right, like advertising, Yelp reviews, signage on the street.
But Danielle and Dave only open Jack maybe 20 times a year.
Exactly. And you can't just walk in off the street. You have to book it online, pay in advance, and most importantly, they already know their audience deeply because the founders run a very popular food blog.
So the blog is the shared interest.
Yes, the restaurant is not a place to feed a crowd. It is a physical clearinghouse for their pre-existing digital tribe. They are basically throwing a dinner party for their readers.
Right.
The food is phenomenal, obviously, but the true product is the heightened tribe-to-tribe communication that happens in that room. The physical space tightens the bonds of the digital community.
Which introduces a really counterintuitive strategy, because if I am trying to build a movement, my instinct is to acquire as many members as humanly possible.
Sure, we all think that.
I want millions of followers.
Yeah.
But you just used the word tighten. The strategy shouldn't be to widen the net, but to tighten the knot.
This is one of the most vital insights in the entire text. We have this fatal obsession with scale.
We really do.
We think bigger is inherently better. But tightening a tribe, making the connections denser, more exclusive, and more intense, almost always yields more leverage and impact than simply making the group wider and shallower.
But how does that actually mathematically work? Why is smaller and tighter more powerful than massive and loose?
It comes down to the density of the network. The sources contrast two organizations to prove this: the American Automobile Association, or AAA, and the TED Conference.
Okay, let's compare them.
AAA is an absolute behemoth. They have tens of millions of members. It is a massive, incredibly wide net. But if you are a AAA member and your car breaks down, you call a dispatch center.
Right.
You never talk to another AAA member. The network density is practically zero. It is a loose group of consumers connected only to a central service provider.
That makes total sense.
Mm-hmm.
I have a AAA card in my wallet, and if I see someone at the grocery store with a AAA keychain, I don't feel a sudden surge of tribal kinship. I don't, walk up and hug them.
No, exactly. Now compare that to the TED Conference. TED has a minuscule fraction of AAA's numbers, maybe a couple of thousand attendees at their main events.
A tiny group.
Very tiny. But TED creates exponentially more global impact, spawns more businesses, and drives more intellectual movements than AAA ever could.
Why?
Because the exclusivity and the structure of TED force an extreme density of member-to-member communication. The people in that room are intensely connected. The tribe is incredibly tight. When a TED attendee meets another TED attendee, there is immediate high bandwidth trust and collaboration.
So a small, highly connected network can exert more force on the world than a massive, disconnected crowd.
Precisely.
And today, leaders have access to unprecedented tools to tighten their tribes. You don't have to rent out a conference center in Monterey like TED does. We have Slack, Discord, private subreddits, dedicated Facebook groups.
We do, but I assume, the technology itself isn't a magic bullet.
Well, yeah.
Because a Slack channel can just be another digital megaphone for a micromanager to shout at their employees.
Right, if you just use it for announcements.
Exactly. The tools only tighten the tribe if the leader operates with the specific intent to step back and let the tribe connect. You have to design the digital space for horizontal communication, not vertical reporting.
Okay, so we've established how to communicate without a megaphone and why tightening the tribe matters. But a tight tribe is still just a group of people with a shared interest talking to each other.
True.
Like a knitting circle is a tight tribe. A fantasy football league is a tight tribe. But they aren't changing the world. How do you take a tight tribe and ignite them into an actual movement?
That is the evolutionary leap. This moves us from key idea 2, which was communication, to key idea 3, the anatomy of a movement. Because you're right, a tribe can sit around the campfire indefinitely, just appreciating their shared interest. But a movement is thrilling. A movement is the coordinated work of many people actively seeking something better. It is inherently disruptive to the status quo.
And the sources provide a really specific recipe for this, drawing on the work of former Senator Bill Bradley.
Yes.
He outlined 3 non-negotiable elements required to build a movement. Let's break those down.
Let's do it.
Element number 1, a narrative about who we are and the future we want to build. It's not a list of facts. It's a story.
A crucial distinction.
Element number 2, a connection between the leader and the tribe, and critically, among the tribe members themselves,
Right.
which we just covered with the campfire concept.
Right.
But element number 3 is where I think almost every corporate initiative completely fails. Element number 3 is something to do, and specifically a task with as few limits as possible.
The limitless task. It really is the engine of the movement. This is exactly where the factory mindset destroys potential. Well, in a factory, you manage people by giving them strict, limited instructions. Fill out this expense report. Make 50 cold calls by 5:10 p.m.
Check the box.
Right. Those are limited tasks. They have a ceiling. You can complete them, check the box, and go back to sleep. A limited task will never, ever spark a movement because it offers no autonomy and absolutely no higher purpose.
It's purely transactional.
Exactly. A movement requires a highly leveraged, limitless task. It requires a goal that can never be truly finished, which means it requires constant creative input from the tribe.
The sources use Muhammad Yunus and the microfinance movement, as well as Al Gore and his climate change initiative, to demonstrate this, right?
They do. And it's fascinating because both of those men were addressing massive global problems. But the fundamental solutions they were proposing were actually understood in academic circles more than 30 years before they ever became mainstream movements.
Wait, if the data and the answers existed for 30 years, why was there no action? Why did it take decades for anyone to actually care?
Because having the right answer is not the same thing as inciting a movement. For 30 years, academics and politicians just used the megaphone. They stood on podiums and shouted facts at crowds. They told people what to do. The turning point for both Yunus and Gore was when they engineered peer support that empowered normal people to take limitless action.
Okay, how did they actually engineer that? Let's get into the mechanics of it.
Yeah.
What did Gore do differently than the academics?
Well, Gore recognized that a global problem like climate change felt way too abstract and paralyzing for an individual. It felt like a limited task. Recycle your cans and hope the government fixes the rest.
Which is depressing.
Very. So instead of just giving speeches, Gore created a program to train thousands of local leaders. He gave them the slide deck, he taught them the narrative,
Okay.
and he gave them a limitless task. Go into your own communities, your churches, your schools, your boardrooms, and educate your peers. He completely decentralized the leadership. He took a global issue and made it local, relying entirely on the tribe-to-tribe trust that a local presenter naturally has with their neighbors.
He basically open sourced the movement.
Yes.
And Muhammad Yunus did something really similar with microfinance, right? giving tiny loans to impoverished entrepreneurs who lacked traditional collateral?
Yes, because traditional banking is a factory. It requires collateral, credit scores, endless forms. It's a very limited top-down system.
Right.
Eunice realized that the most powerful force in a rural village wasn't a bank manager. It was peer pressure and peer support.
How did he use that?
Microfinance relies on lending circles. A small group of women in a village guarantee each other's loans. So the mechanism of accountability isn't a threat from a corporate office. It's the intense tribe-to-tribe social bond.
That's brilliant.
Eunice didn't manage millions of loans himself. He created a system of peer support and gave them the limitless task of lifting their own families out of poverty.
I want to look at a tech example from the sources that honestly just blew my mind because it illustrates the raw leverage of a limitless task. Let's talk about Skype.
Oh, Skype is a perfect example.
Because the founders of Skype, Nicholas Sennstrom and Janice Fries, had a goal that sounded like absolute lunacy. They wanted to overthrow the tyranny of the global telecommunications industry. They wanted to make international phone calls free.
Which, if you approach it with a factory mindset, is a mathematical impossibility.
Completely.
I mean, a massive telecom company like AT&T has billions of dollars in infrastructure, satellites, underwater cables, millions of miles of copper wire. A tiny startup with a handful of employees cannot possibly lay down competing copper wire across the globe.
Right. If they tried to manage their way to success by assigning limited tasks like, okay, you three engineers start digging a trench to London,
Okay.
they would have failed instantly. So they didn't even try to build a traditional network. They built a decentralized peer-to-peer software tool. And the limitless task they gave their tribe of early adopters was essentially, here is the software, you overthrow the phone companies.
It is the ultimate manifestation of the Tom Sawyer principle.
Yes. Tom Sawyer doesn't want to paint the fence. So he convinces his friends that painting the fence is actually an exclusive, thrilling privilege. He gives them the brush, and they do the work.
Exactly.
Skype didn't host the calls on centralized servers. The software used the background computing power of its users' own computers to route the calls. Every time a new person joined the tribe, the network didn't get bogged down. It actually got stronger and faster.
But, I want to push back on this a little bit because it almost sounds like a scam to some people.
Really? How so?
Well, are we saying that the secret to brilliant leadership is just tricking other people into doing all the hard labor for you? Do the best leaders just sit on a beach while the tribe sweats?
Oh, I see what you mean. No, not at all. It is a profound misunderstanding to think the leader is doing less labor. What happens is that the nature of the leader's labor fundamentally shifts.
Okay, untack that.
In a factory, the manager's labor is focused on production and surveillance. They watch the workers to make sure they are digging the trench correctly. In a movement, the leader's labor shifts from production to empowerment. Jimmy Wales and the creation of Wikipedia is the perfect lens for this.
Let's dissect Wikipedia because it really defies all traditional economic logic.
It does. Think about the history of encyclopedias. For centuries, they were built by factories. Britannica or Microsoft Encarta would hire hundreds of credentialed experts, pay them salaries, and heavily edit their work top down.
Very limited tasks.
Exactly. Jimmy Wales wanted to build the most comprehensive encyclopedia in human history, but he didn't have the budget to hire 1 million experts.
Yeah.
Today, Wikipedia is one of the most visited sites on the internet, and its foundation was built by a core group of just about 5,000 highly dedicated volunteers.
Volunteers. People working for free. So how did Wales manage 5,000 unpaid people?
He didn't. Managing them would have been impossible. If he had tried to assign specific articles like, okay, user 492, I need 500 words on the migratory patterns of the Canadian goose by Tuesday.
Yeah.
The volunteers would have quit immediately.
Right, they weren't there to be managed.
No. Wales's labor was entirely about building the social and technological guardrails for the movement. He engaged them in a compelling narrative. The democratization of all human knowledge.
A huge, limitless task.
And he connected them via the wiki technology. He established vital social mechanisms like the talk pages behind every article where the tribe could debate, self-correct, and resolve disputes without a boss having to intervene.
So he basically built the sandbox, established the rules of gravity inside that sandbox, and then just let the tribe build the castles.
Exactly. He motivated, he connected, and he leveraged. He provided a limitless task, document every piece of knowledge in existence, and trusted the intrinsic motivation of the tribe. People are biologically wired to seek autonomy, mastery, and purpose. Paid, limited tasks often destroy intrinsic motivation. Limitless tasks framed by a noble narrative, ignite it.
And the sources point out that this decentralized, loosely coordinated mechanism is incredibly resilient. Malcolm Gladwell actually wrote about how this dynamic tore down the Berlin Wall.
Well, that's a great historical parallel.
Yeah, it wasn't one charismatic leader standing at a podium directing traffic. It wasn't a centralized army with a battle plan. It was a loosely coordinated movement of thousands of activists.
Right.
The movement grew horizontally through peer-to-peer support until the sheer density of the crowd created an unstoppable physical force. You can arrest a centralized leader. You cannot arrest a decentralized network that has fully internalized the narrative.
There's another case study in the materials that brings this down to a much more granular kind of emotional level. Nathan Winograd and the no-kill animal shelter movement.
This is a brutal but fascinating example. Let's look at the status quo Winograd was facing. For over a century, the established dogma of the animal control industry was that there simply weren't enough homes for stray animals.
Right.
The factory model solution was mass euthanasia. They viewed it as a grim but mathematically necessary limited task. Process the animals, hold them for a few days, kill them.
And the industry defended that status quo fiercely.
Fiercely. When Winograd started arguing that it was possible to adopt out every healthy animal, the establishment actively fought him. Directors of other shelters testified against him at city council hearings. They called him a radical.
And Winograd had virtually no resources. He was basically a dog catcher managing a bankrupt rural shelter in Tompkins County, New York.
Yeah.
He had no authority to mandate changes at the national level. He couldn't force the major humane societies to change their policies.
So he bypassed the factory completely. He took his narrative directly to the fringes, to the local public.
How did he do that?
He didn't just ask for donations. He fundamentally changed the narrative from "we are performing a necessary evil" to "we can build a community that values every life."
A much better narrative.
Right. He connected the passionate animal lovers in his county, and he gave them a limitless, highly leveraged task. He didn't just say, adopt a dog. He said, we need fosters. We need volunteers to walk dogs. We need photographers to take better pictures of the animals. We need you to evangelize this mission to your neighbors.
He mobilized a micro-movement. He empowered the community to solve their own problem, rather than relying on a centralized, underfunded government agency to just process the tragedy.
And it worked.
It did. Tompkins County became the first no-kill community in the country, and that peer-to-peer proof of concept ignited a nationwide movement that is completely overthrowing a century-old paradigm. He didn't manage a workforce, he led a tribe.
Which really serves as the perfect transition into key idea 4, small actions, massive leverage. Because when people hear words like build a movement, their brains immediately default to scale.
They think big.
Yeah, they think they need millions of dollars in venture capital, a custom-built app, a PR agency, all of that. But leading from the bottom requires almost nothing in terms of financial budget.
What does it require, then?
It simply requires a leader who is willing to act as a hub of communication, operating with genuine generosity.
The sources provide a story from 1984 that I think perfectly illustrates how low-tech and gritty this can actually be. Let's look at the author's own experience at a tiny software company called Spinnaker.
Oh, this is a masterclass in leading without authority. The author was a 24-year-old kid. He was the 30th employee hired at this startup. He had no staff, no secretary, and zero budget.
Nothing.
Management tasks him with launching a completely new brand of sci-fi adventure games, and they need it shipped in time for the Christmas shopping season.
And to hit that impossible deadline, he calculates that he needs 30 programmers working on it. But management only assigns him 3 engineers from the company pool.
This is the classic agonizing middle management trap. You are given an immense responsibility, but absolutely no authority or resources to execute it.
It's the worst.
If he had acted like a traditional manager, he would have failed immediately. He had no authority to walk up to the other 27 engineers in the company and demand that they stop working on their assigned projects and help him.
Right. If he tried to mandate it, they would have laughed in his face, or his boss would have fired him for insubordination. He had zero factory leverage.
So, barred from demanding compliance, he turns to communication. And this is 1984. There is no Slack. There is no email. So he uses a photocopier.
Photocopier.
He writes a simple newsletter. And twice a week, he physically drops this photocopied newsletter into the interoffice mailboxes of all 100 employees at the company.
But here's the critical part. What did the newsletter actually say? I have to imagine if he just wrote, "Please help me, I am stressed and I need engineers," it would have gone straight into the trash.
Absolutely. Begging is not leadership. The newsletter didn't ask for anything. Instead, it highlighted the breakthroughs of the tiny three-person team he did have.
Okay.
It celebrated their late-night coding sessions. It talked about the radical new ground they were breaking, like figuring out how to put a continuous music soundtrack into a computer game, which was revolutionary at the time. It chronicled their quest.
He was broadcasting a narrative about an epic journey. He was telling a story of innovation happening right down the hall.
And human beings are intensely drawn to a compelling narrative, especially if their day job is boring. The other engineers in the company were likely working on mundane, routine factory tasks. The newsletter offered them a glimpse of magic.
And it worked.
It did. Within a month, the psychology of the tribe took over. 6 engineers voluntarily defected to work on his project in their spare time, then 20. Eventually, every single person in the engineering department was either officially reassigned to his project or moonlighting on it.
They had 30 people sleeping under their desks, ordering takeout, working through the night to hit the deadline. They successfully shipped 5 products and generated millions of dollars in revenue. And the only tool he used to coordinate this massive reallocation of corporate resources was a piece of paper and a photocopier.
It's an incredible story, and it maps perfectly onto an old folktale that reveals the underlying psychology of this kind of leadership.
Are you talking about the story of Stone Soup?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Let's break down the mechanics of stone soup in this context.
Okay, so the classic fable goes like this. 2 hungry travelers come to a village. The villagers are hoarding their food and refuse to share. So the travelers start a fire in the town square, fill a large iron pot with water, and drop a single smooth stone into it. The curious villager asks what they are doing. The travelers smile and say, "We are making a magnificent, magical stone soup. It is going to be a feast to remember. It's already delicious, but it would be absolutely perfect if we just had a few carrots."
And then
So the villager runs home and brings some carrots. Another villager asks about the soup, and the travelers say, "It's coming along beautifully, a real shared feast, but it just needs a little potato."
yeah.
And slowly, drawn by the narrative of a shared journey and a grand outcome, every villager contributes an ingredient.
The travelers bring nothing but a pot, some water, and a narrative. And the tribe supplies the feast.
It is the exact same mechanism as the Spinnaker newsletter. The author provided the pot, the vision, for the sci-fi games. He provided the water, the basic infrastructure of the 3 assigned engineers, and he used the newsletter to talk about how magnificent the soup was going to be. The other engineers brought the carrots and the potatoes, their coding skills, and their late-night hours.
But here is where my skepticism flares up again. Let's talk about the dark side of stone soup.
The dark side.
What happens if you build the fire, boil the water, drop the stone in, start hyping up the soup, and nobody brings any potatoes? You're just a crazy person boiling a rock in the town square. Doing this requires an agonizing amount of vulnerability.
Oh, that's true. You've just identified the exact reason why leadership is scarce and why it is a choice.
Right.
The vulnerability isn't a bug in the system. It is the core feature that creates the value. If boiling a stone guaranteed a feast every single time with no risk of embarrassment, everyone would do it, and it wouldn't be valuable.
That makes sense.
The author at Spinnaker didn't manage those 30 engineers. He took on the difficult, emotionally vulnerable labor of pushing bureaucratic obstacles out of their way, taking the blame if they failed, and injecting the project with a soul. He created what the sources refer to as a mini-religion around the faith of their project.
Faith versus religion. The text makes a very sharp distinction between those two words in an organizational context. Let's unpack that because it explains why the engineers were willing to sleep under their desks.
It's a crucial distinction. In this context, faith is the genuine internal belief that you could do something difficult and that the outcome is worth the sacrifice. It is the raw conviction that drove those engineers to moonlight.
And what's religion?
Religion, on the other hand, represents the codified rules, rituals, and bureaucracy that eventually build up around any successful system. In a corporation, the religion is the employee handbook, the dress code, the standard operating procedures, the mandatory Monday morning status meetings.
Religion is the factory trying to mandate faith.
Exactly. And over time, organizations fall in love with their religion and completely forget their original faith. They care more about whether you filled out the TPS report correctly than whether you are building a great product.
Right.
The leaders that drive change from the bottom, the ones the sources affectionately call heretics, are fundamentally challenging the rigid religion of the status quo, precisely because they have immense burning faith in a new idea.
So the author at Spinnaker ignored the corporate religion of only work on what your manager assigns you and created a new set of rituals.
Right, the twice-a-week newsletter, the late-night coding sessions, all to support the faith of building those 5 games.
But this only worked because his intent was incredibly pure.
What do you mean?
If he had set up that project just so he could secure a massive promotion in a corner office, and he was secretly planning to take all the credit for the engineer's late-night work, it would have failed instantly.
Oh, yeah. The tribe possesses a highly evolved, almost supernatural sense of smell when it comes to intent. They can sniff out selfishness from a mile away.
Absolutely. If a leader is boiling the stone just to feed themselves, the villagers will keep their potatoes hitting. The tribe will not defect from their safe, boring daily tasks to join a journey if they sense they're just being used as leverage for someone else's career.
It only works if the leader is genuinely generous. Everything done must be framed as, for us, not for me.
So the practical application for you, listening to this in your office right now, is to look at the tools you already have. You probably have access to an internal blog or a company Slack workspace or a weekly email update.
Stop using those tools to complain or just report data.
Yes. Use them to highlight the brilliant work of the people around you. Give your peers a compelling, generous journey to join. Human beings are desperate for meaning. If you provide a narrative with actual soul, they will defect from their brain-dead tasks to help you build it.
Which forces us to confront a very harsh economic reality about the modern marketplace, leading us to key idea 5, crowds versus tribes, and the profound danger of what the sources call the good enough trap.
Yes, this is the part of the deep dive that should make anyone who relies on a steady, uncreative corporate job very uncomfortable.
Because keeping your head down relies on a foundational assumption that producing average work is still a mathematically safe strategy. And for the last 50 years, that assumption was mostly true.
It was.
Established brands could build a highly efficient factory, manufacture a perfectly average product designed to offend no one, buy massive amounts of television and radio advertising to force it in front of a massive crowd, and generate incredible profits.
It was the era of mass market dominance. Pepsi, the local hardware store monopoly, the big legacy charities. You didn't need a passionate tribe. You just needed a large enough megaphone to reach the crowd.
But as we defined earlier, a crowd is just a demographic, without a leader and without internal communication. And the internet fundamentally destroyed the economics of reaching the crowd.
Right.
Information is infinite now. Consumers have infinite choices. So the market has fundamentally changed its appetite. Today, the market actively ignores the average. It demands novelty, edge, style, and remarkable things.
There is a line in the sources that I highlighted, double underlined and circled. Average can mean mediocre. If you are perfectly average, you are invisible.
Because if a product or an idea is average, no one in the tribe feels compelled to talk to another tribe member about it. There is no social currency in recommending something standard.
No, none at all.
Defending mediocrity has become an exhausting, losing battle. The sources use the music industry's collapse as the prime example of an organization that aggressively defended the average and got crushed.
Oh, that's a perfect example. The major record labels had a perfectly tuned factory for decades. They controlled the radio promoters, they enjoyed massive profit margins on CDs, and they had an absolute chokehold on distribution. They treated music buyers as a massive, anonymous crowd to be harvested.
And when digital distribution and MP3s arrived, the industry faced a binary choice. A leader would have looked at the technology and said, the old factory model is dead. Let's use the internet to build deeper, direct connections with our fans and monetize live experiences.
But they lacked a heretic. The executives were managers, not leaders. They were terrified of losing their factory authority.
So instead of leading their tribe into a new era, they literally sued their own customers. They spent millions of dollars in legal fees, dragging teenagers into court for downloading songs, trying to legally mandate the survival of the CD.
It is the ultimate example of fighting to preserve the religion while totally losing the faith.
They willfully ignored the changing physics of the market. They refused to accept a profound concept coined by Kevin Kelly, which the sources heavily emphasize, the theory of 1,000 true fans.
Let's explore the math behind 1,000 true fans because it completely flips the mass market strategy on its head.
Yeah, let's break it down.
The theory argues that to create a sustainable movement or a highly successful independent business, you do not need a million casual followers in a massive crowd. You don't need a billboard in Times Square.
What do you need?
You only need 1,000 people who care so intensely about your vision that they become true fans. A true fan is someone who will drive 200 miles to see you speak. They will buy the expensive hardcover edition instead of waiting for the paperback. They will drag 3 friends to your event. They become your decentralized marketing department.
They are the high-density nodes in the network.
Exactly. And this requires a radical psychological shift. You have to stop worrying about most people, because most people are perfectly happy with the products they already have. Most people are terrified of change. Most people will actively mock your new idea until it becomes safe and established. If you try to appeal to most people, you have to water down your idea until it is average. And as we established, average is invisible. You must focus entirely, obsessively, on thrilling the fringes.
Okay, I conceptually agree with this if I am an independent author or an indie musician. But how does this translate internally? If I am a mid-level graphic designer at a massive advertising agency or a supply chain analyst, I am not selling concert tickets.
Yeah.
How do I apply the 1,000 true fans concept to my Tuesday morning staff meeting?
It applies internally with the exact same physics. Within a corporation, your true fans are the early adopters in other departments. They're the rogue colleagues who naturally champion new ways of doing things. They're the handful of executives who are genuinely curious and are willing to provide air cover for experimentation.
So you don't pitch your radical new idea at the all-hands meeting.
Never. If you try to convince the entire company, the internal crowd, to change a deeply entrenched process all at once, the immune system of the factory will attack you. You will be hit with what the sources identify as the most dangerous weapon of the status quo, the not yet.
Oh, the not yet. It's so insidious because it sounds polite.
It is the ultimate bureaucratic shield. Middle managers love not yet because it allows them to kill an idea without having to defend their decision. Great idea, but the budget isn't there yet. Love the initiative, but let's wait until Q3 when things settle down. Not yet is a death sentence for momentum.
So how do you bypass the not yet?
You don't go to the leader of the opposition. You don't waste your energy trying to convert the middle managers who are deeply entrenched in the factory religion. You find the internal fringes.
Okay.
You find the 10 passionate individuals in your office who are frustrated with the slow pace. You win over 10 true fans. You create a secret Slack channel. You build a prototype on the weekends. You connect them. You build a micro-movement, and you create an undeniable proof of concept.
That's amazing.
Defending the status quo will drain your soul. Initiating change with a small, dedicated internal tribe is where leverage, joy, and actual job security live today.
We'd have covered a tremendous amount of conceptual ground today. Let's pull all of these threads together and synthesize the core soul of this material.
Sounds good.
We started by dismantling the myth that you need official, top-down authority to make an impact, exploring how the factory model trained us to be compliant. We looked at how true tribal leaders bypass the megaphone and build campfires, facilitating communication in all 4 directions.
We examine the anatomy of a movement, understanding that you don't command people. You provide a narrative, a deep connection, and a highly leveraged, limitless task that taps into their intrinsic motivation.
We proved that you don't need a massive budget. Sometimes just a photocopier, a pot of boiling water, and a generous narrative is enough to inspire people to defect from their mundane tasks.
And finally, we dismantled the mass market illusion, showing why you must abandon the crowd, ignore the average, and focus intensely on cultivating a tight network of true fans, even inside your own company.
If we distill all of this into a single cohesive truth, it is this. We have been subjected to decades of deep behavioral conditioning by the factory model. We have been graded, managed, and trained to believe that stability is safe, that compliance is rewarded, and that we must wait for an authority figure to hand us a map.
We have been trained to be sheepwalkers, moving through our careers in a state of intellectual slumber because we are terrified of the blame that comes with failure.
Sheepwalkers. It is a devastating, perfect description of so much corporate life.
It is. But the economic reality of the new era proves that this stability is a hallucination. The safest, quietest path is now the riskiest because the average is easily replaced. Right. The most powerful, undeniable force in the modern world is a single individual standing at the absolute bottom of an organizational chart who decides to connect a disconnected group of people and give them a shared, meaningful mission. Leadership in this era is not a rank you achieve. It is a choice you make.
There's an analogy I love that perfectly captures this choice. It's the difference between being a thermometer and being a thermostat.
Oh, I like this.
But a thermometer is a very useful tool. It reads the environment. It tells you the temperature. It tells you if the room is freezing or if it's too hot. Corporate America is absolutely packed with human thermometers. They are the employees who sit in meetings and accurately point out all the problems.
Right. They measure the toxic culture, they whine about the broken processes, they accurately report that the market share is shrinking.
They are providing data, but they are entirely passive. They reflect the environment, but they don't change it.
Exactly. But a thermostat. A thermostat reads the environment, recognizes that it is out of alignment, and then actively initiates a mechanism to change the temperature of the room. It alters reality to sync with what is needed.
The ultimate takeaway here is, don't just sit in your cubicle and measure how bad the culture is. Stop reporting the temperature. Be the thermostat. Initiate the change. Step into the vulnerability, find your true fans, and lead your tribe.
The friction of organizing people has never been lower. The digital tools are free. The leverage is sitting right in front of you. The only remaining barrier is the psychological decision to step into the discomfort and simply begin.
You have the tools, you have the leverage, and the tribe is literally just sitting there in the break room or in that Zoom square or on that subreddit, waiting for someone to finally say, let's go.
Oh.
But if the blueprint is this clear and the tools are this accessible, why do so many of us still hesitate?
That's the million-dollar question.
Next time, we're going to dive headfirst into the uncomfortable reality of fear. We're going to examine the psychology of why we willingly choose to remain sheepwalkers and detail the specific tactical mental shifts required to talk yourself out of the fear of blame so you can finally become the heretic your organization so desperately needs.
That is going to be a fascinating, highly necessary conversation.
Until then, look at the map you've been handed. Recognize that it was drawn for a world that no longer exists. The terrain of leadership is now horizontal, it is beautifully messy, and it belongs entirely to the instigators. Stop waiting for permission and start boiling the stone.
What you just listened was the beginning of a full audio, way longer, explaining every single chapter of the book. If you would like to keep listening to the end and access to the full audio, you can access it with the link down below in the description and in the pinned comment.